Chapter 1289. Another year had passed. Because the situation in the cold Jade Sea region had calmed down and there were no foreign enemies for the time being, Zhang Yan spent most of his time collecting the purple spiritual opportunity. Immediately, a bright light appeared and cast on the map on the top of the hall, showing the selected locations of the mountains, rivers, and rivers. Among them, Blue Feather Pavilion and Pingyuan sect were also there. There were two of his disciples in these two sects, so he also paid a little attention to them. He saw that Blue Feather Pavilion was located on a southwestern island near the Qinsang school, while Pingyuan sect was still located in the southeast, which was considered to be in line with the norm. Apart from these two sects, most of the remaining sects had their sects located in the south. As for the vast northern lands, no one had occupied them. This was because they understood that Qinsang school could not be limited to the cold Jade Sea region. Sooner or later, it would expand outward. They were naturally sensible and would not be the people who stood in the way. Moreover, there were many demons in the north, which was not something they could fight against at present. Instead, if they were located in the south of Qinsang school, they would not have to be afraid of the demons. Jingyu said, "Master, there are also Chongyue True Temple, Yanzhong Temple, Dukhen sect, and more than 10 sects that originally cultivated on the sea. They hope to allow them to place their sects on the 6 continents of the North Sea." Zhang Yan thought for a while and said, "Write a letter saying that I approve of this matter." Although the places where these sects went were far away from the sects of the 9 continents, the sea was vast. The restrictions on the expansion of the sects were also small. The only thing that needed to be noted was that there were many demon sages on the sea, and there was no Taoist abode in their sections. Therefore, they needed to rely on the support of Qinsang school. However, this was also reasonable. In the battle of the human tribulation of the 9 continents, Mi Xiunan and Li Xiumi, the 2 Taoist abode masters died in battle. It should be compensated and taken care of. It was best to send Taoist abode masters to guard the place until a successor appeared. As for the number of people, there was no need for too many. 1 or 2 would suffice. The sects of the 9 continents were different from the 100 countries of the eastern wasteland. All the sects had their own formations, but those demon saints didn't have any magical treasures to break the formations. They could only rely on their innate magical powers. Even if it was an ordinary formation, it would take at least 10 days to break it. However, during this period of time, reinforcements would arrive. After Jingyu reported a few more matters, he retreated. Zhang Yan sat for a while, then stood up and left the main hall, arriving in front of a side hall. The handmaidens on both sides hurriedly bowed and opened the door. Zhang Yan walked in and looked around. He saw a flat monster lying on top of a pile of bloodstones, but at this moment, it did not seem to have any signs of life. This was the intercept demon that had used the living refinement technique to refine the city. However, after the human tribulation battle, this creature had already died of exhaustion. However, after arriving in the mountain and sea realm, Tao Zhenhong had studied the qi and blood transformation technique in detail. He believed that he could use this technique to awaken the intercept demon. However, the premise was that it needed a huge amount of qi and blood. Since the intercept demon could almost fight against the Taoist paradise, to achieve this, it needed at least the blood of a demon saint. However, the demon saint's qi and blood were irritable, so there was no way to use it. Fortunately, Zhang Yan had obtained a lot of blood medicine from the great sage Green Melon, so he decided to give it a try. At that moment, Zhang Yan looked around and saw that there were fewer bloodstones under the severing demon's body than when he returned. The long whiskers that he was dragging outside were trembling slightly. He thought to himself, from the looks of it, this Dharma fruit is useful. If this creature could really awaken, he was prepared to keep it by his side. When he extracted qi, it would protect him, so that he wouldn't have to worry about anything else. He looked at the handmaidens and said, "If the blood medicine here is used up, go to the medicine storehouse and get some more. Don't cut it off." The handmaidens hurriedly agreed. Zhang Yan turned around and walked out of the hall. However, at this moment, he suddenly felt something. He looked up and saw a message talisman with a ghostly aura hovering outside. His eyes flashed, and he recognized that it was a letter sent by Sima Quan. With a thought, the letter fell down. After it was opened in the air, he swept his gaze over it and looked at it carefully. Due to the distance between the two continents, it was impossible to send letters directly around the shocking sky mountain. Sima Quan had to use the clone transmission technique to first send the message, and then use a specially refined flying letter to send it to the cold Jade Ocean region. The message he received was actually from half a month ago. It said that thousands of elders of the Heavenly Ghost Tribe had gathered at the shocking sky mountain to discuss whether or not to attack the sects of the 9 continents. Although the ancestral tribe had the intention to advance, many tribes were opposed. It wasn't that they were afraid of the cultivators of the 9 continents, but they knew that once they agreed, it was very likely that the ancestral tribe would not only take this opportunity to take back the authority in their hands, but also use this opportunity to consume their strength. On the contrary, when the cultivators of the 9 continents came, the ancestral tribe would be the first to be targeted. Therefore, after several months of discussion and all kinds of entanglements, no conclusion was reached. Zhang Yan put the letter away. This matter was unintentionally good news for the sects of the 9 continents, and it gave them more time to prepare. However, he believed that since the Heavenly Ghost Tribe had summoned the tribes, it was impossible that they didn't have a backup plan. There might be some changes in the situation. Sure enough, a month later, Sima Quan sent another letter over. It said that after the various clans had debated for several months without any results, a talisman edict descended from the shocking sky mountain. The contents of the edict requested the Heavenly Ghost Tribe to work together and expel the various sects of the 9 continents. The chief of the Heavenly Ghost Tribe, Yao Zhe, accepted the talisman on the spot, and none of the tribes present dared to oppose it, fearing the might of the upper realm. The matter that had been entangled for several years without any results was settled by this light talisman. Zhang Yan changed his mind. If this matter wasn't caused by the Heavenly Ghost Tribe, then it was very likely that the forces from beyond the heavens had already set their eyes on him. Now was not the best time to fight against the Heavenly Ghost Tribe. Because of the abundance of spiritual opportunity in the mountain and sea realm, as well as the fact that the Heavenly Ghost Tribe had relaxed all sorts of restrictions, he predicted that in the next few decades or even 100 years, the strength of the various sects would increase significantly. Furthermore, the 2 sect leaders would be able to prepare even more profound techniques, which would be the best time to use them. According to Sima Quan's judgment, although the Heavenly Ghost Tribe would invade, the thousands of tribes were scattered everywhere. It would take a long time for them to gather together. Moreover, it would not be easy to mobilize a large force to cross the boundaries of 2 continents. There was a natural moat between the 2 continents, and unless one's cultivation reached a certain level, it would be impossible to cross it. According to normal circumstances, even if the major tribes attacked, it would be at least several decades later. However, Zhang Yan didn't think so. The forces from beyond the heavens were mysterious and unfathomable. In the past, they had raised the Heavenly Ghost Tribe from a small tribe to a powerful force that dominated the western desolate lands. This time, they might have some means to send them over. This matter had to be treated with caution. He immediately wrote a reply, ordering Sima Quan to find a way to disturb the Heavenly Ghost Tribe's deployment and delay them as much as possible. He also ordered Sima Quan to keep an eye on the movements of the Heavenly Ghost Tribe and report immediately if there were any abnormalities. At the same time, he sat down, and with a thought, he leaped into an indescribable void. Almost at the same time, the 2 sect masters, Qin Mabai and Yu Xianshao, also appeared. When Zhang Yan saw the 2 of them, he cupped his hands and bowed. Sect Master Qin said, "Hall Master Duzhen's divine will is here. Is there any change in the situation in the realm?" Zhang Yan explained the whole story, and said, "I think that with the intervention of the forces from beyond the heavens, the Heavenly Ghost Tribe cannot act according to common sense. We must take precautions." Sect leader Qin pondered for a moment and said, "Hall Master Duzhen's concerns are not unreasonable, but if they want to send our people over in a short time, we can cast spells to obstruct them first with the 2 methods, the teleportation technique and the transcendence artifact." Yu Xianshao said, "That's easy. In the past, the Hongha Temple's beautiful painting of knowing void could stabilize the heavenly gate and mess up the void, but it needs a lot of spiritual opportunity. Later, the three of us can work together to activate this treasure and bury it in the void between the two continents. Chapter 1290. About 10 days later, Sima Quan received Zhang Yan's letter. After reading it, the letter turned into ashes. You want me to try my best to delay. His eyes flashed as he thought to himself, if that's all, I won't be able to show my skills. In fact, even if Zhang Yan didn't send a letter, he would still try his best to do it. Because once it was done, not only would it increase his weight among the sects of the 9 continents, it would also make it easier for him to return to the sect in the future. However, it was obviously impossible to go against the ancestral division openly, and the Lu Du clan didn't have the ability to do so. Fortunately, the Heavenly Ghost clans and the ancestral division seemed to be united on the surface, but at heart, they were divided and each had their own thoughts. Especially since most of the clans were unwilling to conquer the cold Jade Ocean continent, perhaps he could try to start from there. After thinking for a long time, he gradually came up with an idea. He walked out of his lodging, ordered his servants not to follow him, and went to the top of the city alone. The Heavenly Ghost's ancestral division's Visit the Heavenly King City was built with white jade and beautiful stones. It was built on the highest peak of the snowy mountain that pierced into the sky. After 10,000 years of continuous expansion and construction, it covered the entire shocking sky mountain. It looked magnificent and exquisite. The city was like spring all year round. Along the way, flowers were laid out on the streets, and the fragrance of fallen petals wafted through the air. However, the path towards the Tao within the city was extremely dangerous and steep. It was mostly built at the edge of a precipice, and when one ascended it, one would be able to see the vast world outside with a single glance and the numerous gorgeous palaces that floated on the floating islands in midair. Even an ordinary pedestrian here was full of chi and blood. Their skin was as black as ink, and their skin was warm and supple. Both men and women were beautiful and charming, and their eyes were bright. In terms of realm, none of them was lower than the internal solid level. At first glance, this was nothing. Which country in the Eastern Baron didn't have tens of thousands of Xian cultivators? But it should be known that the population of the Heavenly Ghost Royal City was more than 100 million. If the hundreds of millions of ordinary clansmen were like this, then how many clansmen equivalent to the spiritual form realm were there? And how many demon saints equivalent to the metaphysic realm were there? The potential was so great that it was hard to imagine. When Sima Quan first came here, he was also shocked. However, he was, after all, a person who had cultivated to become a sky demon. His vision and knowledge were not something an ordinary person could compare to. He knew that the higher one went on the path of cultivation, the more difficult it would be. It was not just limited by talent. The biggest obstacle was the blood potion. With the strength of the Miaming clan, they occupied a large area of the northern cold abyss. They had no choice but to force their clansmen to go out on expeditions. 80 million. There were no more than 20 demonic saints among them. Moreover, the strength of Heavenly Ghost's royal city might not be able to surpass that of the frigid Jade Ocean province in the past. Based on this, it could be inferred that there would not be too many demon saints here. 20 or 30 would be the best they could do. But the most frightening thing was that if these demon saints died in battle, it wouldn't take long for someone to replace them. Just now, this was something to be afraid of. Therefore, in order to destroy the Heavenly Ghost tribe, the people in this city had to be eliminated. Then he turned a corner into a grassy field. At the corner where the clear spring flowed, there were many large pagodas in front of them. Every brick and stone was exquisitely carved from jade. At a glance, it was hard to count. This tower was called World Mirror, and it was rumored that it could protect Imperial City. Every heaven ghoul who came of age, whether they were from the ancestral clan or the branch clans, had to offer a jade brick to the ancestral clan to build this tower. And the more beautiful and exquisite the jade was, the higher the rank. Once they were placed at the top, they would be able to receive praise, and the person at the top would be able to do so. Men could be bestowed by the ancestral clan, daughters could marry, and women could enter the 10,000 pagodas as sacrifices. In the long run, the marriage of the various tribes was determined by the ranking of the jade bricks. And to achieve this, the person who offered the jade needed to carve the jade carefully, and even inject their own chi, blood, and spirit into it. Under this kind of competition, almost no one was willing to fall behind. All of them did their best. Through this rule, the ancestral clan could not only mobilize the power of the various tribes to build an ancestral court for themselves, they could also use this object to grasp the general population strength of the various tribes. Even though many people might hide their true abilities, they were only a minority and did not affect the overall situation. Sima Qian knew that this was the greatest obstacle to the sects of the 9 continents attacking this place. If there was a chance, he would think of a way to destroy it. After staring for a while, he walked to the sun-worshipping palace where the patriarchs lived. It was said that only the patriarchs could live here, and the others had to stay elsewhere. In reality, the ancestral clan had found an excuse to separate the patriarchs from their subordinates to avoid any trouble. He gave some benefits to the guard and quickly entered the inner room. After a few turns, he arrived in front of the residence of the patriarch of the Furnace Poison clan, Furnace Poison Yu. After being notified, he was summoned in. Entering the door, he saw Furnace Poison Yu sitting behind the table with a frown. He walked up, bowed deeply, and asked tentatively, "Brother Wang, do you have something troubling you?" Furnace Poison Yu sighed, "Isn't it because of the matter of the tribe attacking the northern heaven-cold abyss? I heard that the cultivators from beyond the heavens who came back are not simple. I wonder how many people will die in this battle." Sima Qian put on an anxious expression and said, "Brother, I think we must not follow the arrangements of the ancestral clan. It was not easy for the ancestors to manage such a good situation. Are we going to ruin it just like this?" When he spoke, his voice was impassioned and he looked extremely agitated. Furnace Poison Yu shook his head and said, "I also understand the logic here, but if the lips are gone, the teeth will be cold. If I don't fight those cultivators from beyond the heavens, with the hatred I have with them in the past, one day they will come back to us." Sima Qian looked left and right, revealing a mysterious expression, and said in a low voice, "This is what I want to tell Brother Wang. I heard that those cultivators from beyond the heavens are not the same as the cultivators we have killed in the past." Furnace Poison Yu was startled. "Is there such a thing?" He pondered for a while and said, "No matter where they come from, since they have destroyed the Shanyang clan, they have already formed a hatred with our heavenly ghost tribe. There is no possibility of reconciliation. Moreover, even the upper realm has intervened. It is enough to prove that the fire on the other side is not small. If we wait for them to burn even bigger, there will be no way for us to survive, so it is better to wipe them out as soon as possible." Sima Qian was a little impressed. Furnace Poison Yu saw clearly that if it was not for the guardian jade bestowed by the ancestral clan, he would not be able to take over his body, and he would not need to waste his breath. But he said, "Brother Wang, aren't you worrying too much? They said that the cultivators from beyond the heavens want to kill me, but they are still 2 continents away. Even if they attack, with the ancestral clan and the people from the upper realm, how will they find us?" Furnace Poison Yu sighed, "No matter what you say, it is useless. With the upper realm's edict, who would dare to disobey?" Sima Qian understood that the heavenly ghost tribe relied on the benefits given by the upper realm to gradually become stronger. After more than 10,000 years, they naturally had a kind of natural reverence for it, and could not force it to disobey. Fortunately, he had already prepared an excuse. He said in a low voice, "What if the edict is not from the upper realm?" "What?" Furnace Poison Yu was shocked and stood up. "You are saying that the ancestral clan forged the edict?" Then he calmed down again, sat down slowly, and shook his head. "Impossible, impossible, the ancestral clan would not dare to do so, unless the clan is not afraid of the upper realm's punishment, otherwise they would not do so." Sima Qian's eyes flickered. He said, "That is to say, Brother Wang also cannot distinguish the authenticity?" "This." Furnace Poison Yu hesitated for a while, then said, "I cannot prove that it is authentic, but I also cannot say that it is fake." Sima Quan walked a few steps closer, and said, then if we are suspicious, it is not too much to ask the ancestral clan to produce proof, right? Furnace Poison Yu looked up at him, and said, how can you ask the ancestral clan to do so? Although my Furnace Poison clan is a big clan, we do not have that kind of reputation. Sima Quan smiled, and said, Brother Wang, my Furnace Poison clan cannot do it, but what if we add in the other clans? Furnace Poison Yu was shocked, and said, you mean to contact the other clans? No, if the ancestral clan finds out, it will definitely be disadvantageous to me. Sima Quan said, Brother Wang, how can I let the clan fall into such a disadvantageous situation? I think, as long as this news is released, as long as there are clans that are unwilling to be ordered around by the ancestral clan, they will definitely request to do so. At that time, my Furnace Poison clan only needs to shout from behind. Furnace Poison Yu came back to his senses, he carefully thought about it, and appeared to be moved, and said, your idea is not bad, this is very promising. Sima Quan bowed, and said, if Brother Wang agrees, I will arrange this matter. Furnace Poison Yu hesitated, and after a while, he finally agreed, and said, all right, go do it, just be careful, don't get yourself into trouble, even if it doesn't work, it doesn't matter. Sima Quan said, Brother Wang, don't worry, I will handle it carefully. How did he get himself into trouble? In these days, he had spread his clones all over the clans, and when the time came, he just needed to instigate them together. Now, his methods were even more brilliant and hidden, he did not occupy anyone's consciousness, but instead, he was subtly influencing them from behind. Even if Sky Demon had the help of an extraterrestrial force, they would not be able to see through it. A few days later, rumors spread in Yen Heavenly King City, saying that the decree that descended that day was not really a decree from the upper realm, but a forgery by the ancestral clan. They just wanted to use the opportunity of conquering the northern heaven cold abyss to take back the authority of the various clans. The various clan leaders were indeed worried about this, if they were in the same position, they would definitely do the same. Therefore, they did not care whether it was true or not, and all of them first clamored to find out whether the decree from the upper realm was real or fake. But for some reason, there was no response from the ancestral clan. Sima Quan was the one who pushed behind the scenes, and he already knew that this would be the result. Once Sky Demon's ancestral clan was involved in this matter, it would not be easy to settle it. Even if the upper realm sent another decree, the clans could still say that it was a forgery, unless they were given a chance to verify it. But the problem was, the ancestral clan was the ancestral clan because they had the authority to communicate with extraterrestrial forces. If they allowed the clans to investigate this time, and someone questioned the next time the decree was sent, would they also have to investigate? What about the next time? What about the next time? Once this matter was opened, there would be endless troubles, and it would greatly shake the prestige of the ancestral clan. As long as the clan leader Feng Zhe was clear-headed, he would never agree. Sima Quan believed that Sky Demon's ancestral clan would definitely be able to solve this matter, but it would probably take a long time for them to come up with a solution. But at that time, he would continue to use other methods. In short, he had to firmly delay the clans of Sky Demon here, so that the sects of the 9 continents had enough time to prepare. Chapter 1291. Visit the Heavenly King City, Chengze Platform. This was the place where the Heavenly Ghost's ancestral tribe received the talisman from the upper world. There was nothing here to rely on. Looking down, the vast plain at the foot of Shocking Sky Mountain was only as big as a basin. Looking down, one could see all the boundless land in the distance. Clan leader Yao Zhe walked down from the altar step by step, holding the elephant bone staff. He appeared to be only 17 or 18 years old. He wore a golden crown and a silver robe. His skin was fair, and his figure was slender. His appearance was somewhat delicate and weak. However, his black eyes and golden pupils made people's hearts tremble when they looked at him. 2 clan kings stood at the bottom of the stairs. They were the Qi clan's patriarch, Qi Hua, and the Suiqing clan's patriarch, Suiqing Jian. The rulers of the capital were the 3 upper echelons, the Gui family, the Blaze family, and the Suiqing family. In name, the three of them had the authority to rule over the Heaven Ghoul race. There were also 6 smaller clans that were not low in status, but they were only subordinates. Sui Qingjian asked with concern, "My king, are there any more talismans from the upper realm?" Lu Zhi said calmly, "The upper realm only sent down a white imperial decree." The 2 tribe leaders revealed looks of disappointment. The so-called White Order meant that there were no specific instructions, and they were allowed to write their own words on it. As long as it did not go against the upper realm, it was fine. Even though the value of this item wasn't low, it wasn't useful to solve the problem at hand because they couldn't use it to prove the authenticity of the decree. Sui Qingjian looked worried and said, "We can't let our subordinates check the talisman edict, but if they refuse to obey the edict and delay the important matter, won't we be going against the order of the upper realm?" Qi Hua's body was just a puff of smoke. He seemed to be in an invisible state, but he was constantly emitting dazzling light. He said coldly, "I've said it before. Without thunder and lightning, there will be no wind and rain. As long as we take care of those leaders and promise some benefits to the other clans, this matter will be suppressed." 8 novels. Sui Qingjian said hurriedly, "You mustn't do that." He had also heard that many tribes had arranged for a successor when they came out. Not only were they unable to force them to lower their heads, but they were also unable to do so. Instead, there will be internal strife. You should know that the cultivators from beyond the heavens are our greatest enemies, not the clans. Qi Hua said stubbornly, "If the tribes have different thoughts, my king, how can you command them to fight against the enemies? These people are like worms and must be killed." Yao Zhi said calmly, "Elder Sui Qing, your worries are reasonable. If it was any other day, I could use Elder Qi's method to deal with it slowly. However, there are cultivators from beyond the heavens outside, so I can only make some concessions." King Zhihua said, "We'll have to check the imperial decree." Sui Qingjian was slightly panicked as well, and he persuaded, "Your Majesty, you can't do that either. Otherwise, not only will the clans lose their respect for me, they might even have thoughts of rebelling." King, elders and King Zhe clan leader of masters, Dragon King. "I know what I'm doing." He took a few steps forward and placed the elephant cane on the rack before saying, "This is actually not a difficult matter. The tribes are just afraid that I will seize their authority and divide their tribes. Since they want authority, I will give it to them. Later, I will issue an edict to allow them to guard the territory of their tribes for generations. If there is no war, I will give it to them. If you don't obey the king's order, the tribute will be halved. This way, the tribes will be reassured." Qi Hua frowned and took a step forward. He said, "My king, won't King City lose its power to control the tribes? Who will listen to the ancestral clan? The territories occupied by the tribes still belonged to the ancestral clan in name, but they were just guarding them. Visitation Heavenly King City often used this excuse to suppress many large tribes that were too powerful, but once they gave up, they would no longer have the right to suppress other tribes in the future." Zhe said, "Are the tribes under my command?" He shook his head and said, "Wrong. They follow the edict of the upper world. As long as they have the edict, King City will be above the tribes. It doesn't make a difference whether it is allowed or not." Sui Qingjian said angrily, "My king is right. Even if we send people to occupy the newly occupied territories, they will be loyal and diligent at first. But after hundreds or thousands of years, they will become disloyal and become like the others." The Western Desolate Domain was unimaginably vast. In order to occupy more land and obtain more blood medicine, the Heavenly Ghost Tribe could only adopt such a strategy. As for the drawbacks, they were also very clear about them. But no one could change the rules that had lasted for tens of thousands of years, not even the White Kings. Qi Hua said in a low voice, "But this may not be enough to feed the tribes. Retreating won't help. What if they push their luck? My king, have you thought about this?" Qi Hua smiled, "Don't worry, Elder Qi, this edict will be under the name of the upper world. If the tribes accept it, they will have to follow my orders." The 2 were startled. They lowered their heads and pondered. Their eyes brightened as they understood Qi Hua's intention. Once this edict was issued, the tribes could only believe it to be real in order to get the benefits. And to protect their own interests, they would try their best to prove that it was not fake. Since the second edict was real, the previous one would not be fake either. Otherwise, how could the upper world not be angry and send down edicts one after another? In this way, the expedition against the cultivators from beyond the heavenly domain would be justified. Qi Hua threw a bait for them to bite. Even if they knew it was a trap, they would not let it go. Sui Qingjian said happily, "My king is wise. With this plan, we will definitely be able to solve the current problem." Qi Hua shook his head. "It is not difficult to solve this problem. But I feel that the expedition to the northern cold abyss will not be smooth sailing. There may be more twists and turns." Qi Hua's eyes flickered. "My king, are you suspecting that the cultivators from beyond the heavenly domain are involved in this?" Lu Zhi said calmly, Maybe not, but I have to be on guard. However, this also reminds me that we can't let those extraterrestrial cultivators live so peacefully in the northern cold abyss. We need to do something to them. Sui Qingjian was puzzled. The two places are so far apart. How can I find him? My king, are you trying to instigate the demon tribes in the northern cold abyss? But I heard that under the suppression of the cultivators from beyond the heavenly domain, they are no longer a threat. Qi Hua did not deny it. He only asked, rumor has it that the demon king Qing Feng of the Ming clan had cultivated 24 wings, but he was still defeated by the cultivators from beyond the heavenly domain? Sui Qingjian said, of course. That day outside the frigid Jade Ocean province, there were many demons who saw the light of the sun being taken away. It was clearly the power of the demon ancestor. Qi Hua nodded, so there must be someone among the cultivators from beyond the heavenly domain who can break through the blue sky and ascend to the upper world. Qi Hua said, something strange happened in the resting place of the demon ancestor Huanming. It must be this person who went there to avoid future troubles. If there is no such person, who would dare to provoke them? Qi Hua said, judging from the information Lian Ji sent back, these cultivators from beyond the heavenly domain are led by two big sections. So there must be at least two people with such power, maybe more. This situation is so familiar. Elders, do you remember how we dealt with the 3 high priests of the Eastern Barren Divine Kingdom? Sui Qingjian said without hesitation, of course we gave them. His body trembled as he said this. He looked up and said, my king, do you mean to send the Ascension Talisman to them? Qi Hua said lightly, why not? These cultivators from beyond the heavenly domain are not the same as those I have killed in the past 10,000 years. What they want is no different from the high priests of the Eastern Barren Divine Kingdom. Give them the Ascension Talisman, and it's up to them to decide. Sui Qingjian praised, my king, once the two cultivators from beyond the heavenly domain leave, their strength will be greatly reduced. The rest will be much easier to deal with. Qi Hua also nodded and said, if the two of them ascend, there will be people from the upper realm to deal with them on our behalf. We don't have to risk our lives. This is killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Sui Qingjian sighed and said with pity, it's a pity that there is only 1 Ascension Talisman every 3,000 years. We have given 2 to the 2 high priests of the Eastern Barren Divine Kingdom. Now, we only have 2 left. This time, we have to give them all away. Qi Hua did not feel it was a pity. He said, as long as our heavenly ghost tribe is safe, we can always get the talisman again. Moreover, the few elders are still sleeping, so we don't need it for now. The heavenly ghost was a spirit, not a human. Although its chi and blood were stronger than that of a mystic cultivator, it was still very difficult for them to break through the upper realm after returning to their ancestral bodies. The talisman could only be used to guide the way forward. It could not protect those who ascended. If they could not break through the heaven and earth realm's door, then it would be useless. Seeing that the 2 elders did not object, Qi Hua turned and bowed to the altar. A moment later, 2 beams of golden light shot up into the sky. Outside of the energy shield of the mountain and sea realm, Zhang Yan was in the middle of adjusting his breathing and circulating his magic in the Azure Heaven Temple. Suddenly, he sensed something, and looked over to see two beams of brilliant light shooting up from the ground below. After reaching the void, they began to descend toward frigid Jade Sea Prefecture. Those two things seem to be coming from the western void, he mused. They seem to be coming from the western void. He didn't dare to underestimate them. His body flickered as he pierced through the void to appear in the mountain and sea realm. There, he used his magical power to grab hold of the two beams of light. Their aura was pure, and there was nothing hidden about them. Examining them closely, he saw that they were two dazzling golden talismans, about half a foot long. After examining them for a moment, his expression flickered, and he said, "Ascension talismans?" In the mountain and sea realm, only the heavenly ghost tribe could give away something like that. After thinking about it for a moment, he could more or less guess what they were trying to do. They had used this talisman to invite away the two high priests of the Eastern Wasteland's divine kingdom, which had led to the decline of the various Taoist nations. It seemed they wanted to repeat the same trick again. Smiling, he put the talisman away, and then sent the two beams of light out into the void. Although they were only two talismans, it was highly likely that they involved the power from beyond the heavens. Therefore, he had no choice but to treat them with caution. Only by discussing the matter with the two sect leaders would he be able to make a decision. Flicking his sleeve, he flew down into the floating heavenly palace, where he remained for a few days. Suddenly, two rumbling sounds could be heard, and two beams of clear light shot down from above. The two sect leaders had returned to the mountain and sea realm. Chapter 1292. Seeing that the two sect leaders had arrived, Zhang Yan stood up and walked towards the main hall. When he arrived at the main hall, he first went forward to pay his respects, then sat down and said, "Today I have encountered a matter that involves too many things. It is difficult for disciple to make a decision by myself, so I had no choice but to invite the two sect leaders back to discuss." $F. He took out the two talismans from his sleeve. Sect Master Qin took a look at the talisman and immediately recognized its origin. Slightly surprised, he asked, "Ascension talisman?" He waved his horsetail whisk, and the two decrees immediately flew up. One flew toward Yu Xianshao, and the other landed in front of him. Yu Xianshao took a look and said, "It is indeed an ascension talisman. If there is nothing wrong with the realm on the other side, I can break open the heaven and earth door and use it as a guide to enter that world. May I know where Taoist Zhang obtained it?" Zhang Yan smiled and replied simply, "From the west." Sect Master Qin thought for a moment and saw through the scheme. He said with a smile, "The story of the Eastern Wilderness Divine Kingdom is interesting." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Based on my understanding of the Heavenly Ghost Tribe these days, I'm afraid that half of the reason is that they want to use us to test the upper realm. If we fight with this force, I'm afraid that it will be exactly what they want." Yu Xianshao said indifferently, "This matter is very normal. Most of the people who possess authority in the mortal world don't like others ordering them around." Sect Master Qin nodded and said, "What's the situation in the Western Desolate Domain now?" Zhang Yan flicked his sleeve and a ray of spiritual light flew out. The light reflected the scenes of many people in the city of Heavenly Ghost Yi Tianwang City. From the meeting of the various tribes to the people's livelihood, there was nothing missing. Along with the images were 100 letters. Among them were the news that Lian Ji had sent back to the clan, as well as the secret news that Sima Quan had sent back. After looking around, the two sect leaders had a general understanding of the Heavenly Ghost Tribe situation. Yu Xianshao thought to himself, "When I was observing this place from the outer space, I didn't notice anything strange. I felt that sky-shocking mountain is a place that is like a sword and has magnetic chaotic light. It is suitable for us Shaoqing cultivators to train here. Looking at it now, I have indeed chosen the right place." Sect Master Qin said, "The Heavenly Ghost Tribe has repeatedly sent down imperial edicts from beyond the heavens. That is to say, it is very likely that there is a Tong Tian Gui hidden in their clan, which is why they can travel between the two realms." Zhang Yan nodded slightly. As the chief of the Duzhen sect, other than some of the secrets that only the chief knew, he knew most of the things recorded in the sect. He had seen the description of the sky-piercing sundial in a jade slip left behind by the second-generation sect master, Chen Luozhou. It was rumored that this item could be used to transmit the talisman book of the two realms or precious materials. Only those with great supernatural powers could refine it. As for the specifics, there were no detailed records. He could understand this. The second-generation sect master was also a person from beyond the heavens, but when he followed the great underworld patriarch to the 9 continents, he was only a child. Perhaps he had not seen it with his own eyes, and perhaps he had only heard about it from the great underworld patriarch. At that time, there were many people from beyond the heavens in the 9 continents. However, none of them put down the sky-piercing sundial. This was not because the people who came were not skilled enough. Rather, it was because the 9 continents were tightly shut. It was difficult for even cultivators to break in, not to mention using magic artifacts to send messages. Sect Master Qin put down the imperial edict and said with a smile, "Since the heavenly ghost tribe has kindly sent this talisman over, let's keep it first. In the future, it will be easier for us to investigate the specific situation of that side of the void." Zhang Yan pondered for a while. "If we want to do this, we have to send someone over first." Sect Master Qin looked over and said, "Could it be that Hall Master Duzhen already has a candidate in mind?" Zhang Yan smiled and said, "That force is currently hostile to me, so I think that if the cultivators of the 9 continents come here, something bad might happen. If the cultivators of the 9 continents come here, I'm afraid that something bad will happen. Fortunately, I've already formed an alliance with the countries of East Wilderness, so I can invite a great mystic cultivator to do this." Sect Master Qin pondered for a moment and said, "That's feasible." In fact, once the cultivators of the mountain and sea realm reached the mystic enlightenment realm, they would have divine abilities to break into the void. However, they had the responsibility of guarding the borders of their country, so they wouldn't leave easily. Furthermore, they didn't have protective magic artifacts, so even if they went into the void S&C, they wouldn't be able to last long. However, if they could get the support of the sects of the 9 continents to forge magic artifacts and use the talisman as a guide, it wouldn't be difficult for them to go to the other side of the void. The only thing they had to consider was that it would be difficult to send news back after flying to the other world. That would require the help of the sky-piercing sundial. In order to obtain this item, the heavenly ghost tribe had to attack it first. The 2 sect masters also understood this principle. Right now, the only thing they could do was to eradicate the heavenly ghost tribe first before going back to deal with that force from the beyond heaven. Now that they had the imperial edict to guide them, as long as they didn't have to worry about anything else, they just needed to wait for the Kun to recover its vitality, and then they could charge into this world. Above the frigid north depths, an airship was flying in the direction of the frigid Jade Sea Prefecture. Most of the people on board were princes and nephews from the various nations of the eastern wastelands. Most of them were 14 or 15 years of age, which wasn't too late to start cultivating Qi Dao techniques. This was their first time leaving the eastern wastelands, and the scenery they saw along the way was an eye-opener for them. A dozen or so young people were standing at the bow of the airship, pointing excitedly down below. "I heard that the frigid north depths used to be filled with demons and devils," said young Master Zhao from the eastern wastelands. "But after the cultivators of the 9 continents arrived, they either killed them or tried to drive them away. Along the way, there were no more demons within millions of kilometers. Not even the eastern wasteland's divine kingdom has ever accomplished such a feat." A young man in embroidered clothes was unconvinced and said, "So what? If it weren't for the 2 priests from thousands of years ago." At this moment, young Master Zhao waved his hand and cut him off. He sneered and said, "I hate hearing such words the most. I am from the Eastern Barren Kingdom, and I admire the 2 high priest fathers very much. However, these 2 ancestors did not leave behind anything. How can we talk about something that has never happened? But the cultivators of the 9 continents really did it. At least from now on, the nations of the human Tao will no longer be afraid of the demons and devils from the frigid north depths. Isn't this worthy of our admiration?" Hearing this, the young people nodded. "Young Master Zhao is right." Someone asked curiously, which sect is young Master Zhao going to join? Young Master Zhao said proudly, if you want to learn, then learn the best techniques. Of course, it's Qinsang School. You should know that there are powerful cultivators at the Purple Sun realm there, and killing demonic ancestors is nothing difficult for them. Exclamations came from the boat. According to the rules set by the sects of the 9 continents, the nobles sent by the eastern wastelands could directly join a small sect if they chose one. But if they chose a big sect, it wouldn't be so easy. They had to first become an outer sect disciple and open their meridians in 4 to 5 years before they could enter the sect to cultivate. If they didn't succeed and didn't want to return to the country, then they could only transfer to a small sect to cultivate. But who would be willing to do such a humiliating thing? Many people thought about it and chose to join a small sect. Young Master Zhao dared to do so. Regardless of his talent, at least his courage and confidence were better than most of the people here. On the other side of the boat, there were some young girls gathered. They were mostly nobles who were preparing to join the Li Mountain sect. The Li Mountain sect was also one of the big sects of the 9 continents. It was just that there wasn't anyone from the heavenly abode in charge, so it didn't have the same rules as the other big sections. As long as they were willing to join, they could be considered as an inner disciple. It was just that this sect only accepted female disciples, which made many nobles' disciples sigh. At this moment, in the main pavilion of the boat, Han Ji sat behind the table and read the book in his hand. He was ordered by Jinren Wen to go to a big city in the Xinfang country. It took him a year and a few people from the same sect. Just now, they had finished setting up the restrictive array formation. Now that they could return to the mountain gate, they could escort these nobles' disciples here. The cabin door opened, and a young man in blue came in. He served tea respectfully and placed it on the table, saying, "Master, please enjoy." Han Ji took a look, put it down. "Why don't you talk to them?" The young man in blue said, "I don't like crowds." Han Ji smiled, "Your character is indeed suitable to be a disciple of the Ling sect. How's the cultivation of the method I taught you?" Speaking of cultivation, the young man in blue became much more spirited. He said, "Initially, I didn't have enough vital energy and blood, so it was difficult for me to cultivate the method of Xianshi. I thought that I could only study Confucian classics, write essays, and spend the rest of my life with lamps and beads. However, I followed the method of breathing and expiration that you taught me. After a year of cultivation, I feel that my inner qi is full and my spirit is much better. I have tried it privately, and a ferocious tiger is no match for me." Han Ji nodded slightly. Back then, he was already injured in his mother's womb. He was congenitally deficient, so he could only cultivate the method of the Ling sect. Looking at this young man, he couldn't help but think of himself. He put down the book and said, "Your progress is not bad. In another 3 to 4 years, you can try to open your meridians. However, the Ling sect is different from the Xianshi. Even before opening your meridians, you can cultivate the art of killing. I will now teach you a method to absorb souls." Just as he was about to say the method, he frowned and suddenly waved his sleeve. A blood light flew up, and with a curl, a monster the size of a finger came down from the cabin roof. He said calmly, "A mere demon. If you didn't do anything outside, I wouldn't have bothered with you. How dare you come here and listen to my method? Do you really think that I can't detect you?" The demon's head was similar to a human's. It had facial features, but its appearance was ugly. However, its body was like a fish, with fins and scales. At this moment, it was twisting and howling, and its voice was extremely ear-piercing. At this moment, Han Ji saw that the young man in blue was deep in thought. He asked, "Could it be that you recognize this thing?" The young man in blue thought for a while and bowed. He said, "Teacher, I have seen this demon in the picture book. It seems to be a person from the 100th southern Luo continent. It has the ability to attach itself to a person's body. It is said that when a person is dreaming, it can drill into the brain through the nose aperture. Nothing can be seen on the outside, but the inside of the person is unknowingly controlled by it." Han Ji said, "The 100th southern Luo continent? The young man in blue said, yes. There are many strange living beings in this continent. However, the terrain is broken and it is far from the 100 countries of the eastern wilderness. We rarely have any dealings with it. Han Ji said, it's easy to deal with it now that you know where it came from. He thought to himself, now that the sects of the 9 continents are preparing to deal with the Western Absolute Domain, a beast from the 100 southern Luo continent has sneaked onto the ship at this time, with the intention of attaching itself to the noble sun. This is definitely not a coincidence. Looks like I have to report this when I return. Chapter 1293. A few days later, the boat arrived at Cold Jade Ocean region and anchored on a floating cloud island. Cultivators from various sects came to receive the noble sons of the various countries. These young men and women had different identities after all. Accompanying them were not only a large number of servants, but also many mystic cultivator guards. Not long after they got off the flying boat, they boarded cloud rafts and spirit birds, bidding each other farewell as they went to the sects they had chosen. Gongzi Zhao had decided to enter Qinsang school, so he waited on the spot without moving. Now that he had arrived at this place, according to reason, Han Ji was already safe and could have left. However, he felt that encountering the demons of the 100 southern regions on the way was not a small matter and he had to report it to his superiors. Therefore, he brought the blue-robed youth to the Cloud Island and waited for the people from the Dark Azure sect to arrive. Half a moment later, a golden boat flew over. This time, it was a nascent soul cultivator from the Du clan who came to welcome Gongzi Zhao into the sect. After this person got off the flying boat, he was slightly startled when he saw Han Ji. He walked over and greeted, so it's Daoist Han here. Are you here to visit an old friend? Han Ji returned the greeting and said plainly, since I've abandoned my former self, I've cut off my past. It's fine not to see my old face. This time, I'm escorting the noble sons of eastern barren countries here, but I encountered a demon from Nanluo 100 continents hiding on the boat, so I captured it. Since you're here, I'll leave it to your sect to deal with. He took out a red jade gourd and handed it to him. This demon is inside. When the spiritual master of the Du clan heard this, his expression turned serious. For Han Ji to wait here for this demon, it was clear that this matter was not simple. He received it solemnly and said, I'll report it to my superiors. Han Ji bowed again and said, then I'll take my leave. He called out to the blue-robed youth and turned to board the flying boat again. Soon, it broke through the clouds and flew towards the abyss. The spiritual master of the Du clan looked at the red jade gourd in his hand and ordered his disciples, bring the young master of Eastern Baron to the side yard to settle him down. I need to make a trip to the sect. As he spoke, he flew up and headed towards the floating heavenly palace. One of Gongzi Zhao's servants saw him leave just like that. Young master, you're a descendant of the Gong family, how can this man treat you with such disrespect, said Ji Hao angrily. Gongzi Zhao didn't mind. He said, Zhao Fei is a cultivator. For these extraterrestrial cultivators, I'm just a mortal. How can they treat me? In the future, don't say such things again, lest others hear it. I won't let you off for ruining my reputation. The servant became timid and did not dare to make another sound. Half a day later, the gourd containing the person was delivered to Fu Baoxing. He removed the gag and fell down. The person in the valley rolled out from the inside, but was suppressed by his aura. He trembled and couldn't move at all. He cultivated the Yuxiao Thousand Snatches sword manual, so he was especially sensitive to the changes in qi. After taking a closer look, he realized that something was wrong. It was just a clone. He frowned and asked in a deep voice, who are you? Why did you transform into a clone and come here? After a while, a strange voice came from the body of the person in the valley, your divine power isn't great. I didn't expect you to be able to see through the secret of my clone. You do have some ability. Fu Baoxing said, although your qi and blood is great and you have the ability of a demon saint, your divine power is very shallow. However, this divine ability is very shallow. I believe that the spiritual master Han who captured you has already seen through it. He just didn't want to expose it. The person wasn't angry, but seemed to be quite interested. You do have some skills. I'm the king of the 5 kingdoms of the South Sea 100 continents. I heard that there are extraterrestrials in the northern heaven cold abyss who are very different from us. I was curious, so I came to take a look. Fu Baoxing shook his head and said, your words are not true. If you are a visitor from afar, the sects of the 9 continents will definitely treat you well. There's no need to be so sneaky. The king of the 5 kingdoms laughed and said, I wanted to come and visit, but the land under my rule isn't peaceful. I can't leave easily, so I could only send a clone over. I didn't expect your side to see through me. However, there aren't many people like me who are easy to talk to in the South Sea 100 continents. There are many demon kings in the continent, most of them are savage and ignorant. Once they are provoked, they will rush to find trouble with others. If your side meets them in the future, don't hold back. Fu Baoxing's expression changed slightly. This demon king seemed to have a hidden meaning in his words. However, he knew very little about the South Sea 100 continents, so he could only listen. The king of the 5 kingdoms said, since you have seen through my divine power, I won't embarrass myself here. Wait for me to greet the person in charge of your side. As long as we are in this world, we will meet again in the future. See, as soon as he finished speaking, the person in the valley exploded into a pile of dust. Fu Baoxing thought for a while and said, I need to report this to my teacher. He took out a talisman that Zhang Yan gave him and left a trace of consciousness in it. He sent it into the sky. The spiritual light broke through the clouds and went straight to the azure sky hall. In the virtual sky, Zhang Yan was collecting the purple gas. He felt that the talisman that he had given earlier had some movement. He waved his sleeves and returned to the hall. He took the talisman book and felt the consciousness. He knew the whole story. He couldn't help but think. The South Sea 100 continents appeared at this time. Were they trying to fish in troubled waters, or were they also a chess piece of that force from beyond the sky? It was hard to tell. Moreover, according to the information provided by Lian Ji, every time Sky Demon dealt with people from beyond the sky, it didn't just fight on its own. It also made use of the native beings. For example, East Barren Country's High Priest Tuo. His eyes flashed. Before the South Sea 100 continents showed their attitude, he could only treat them as an enemy. Not only did he have to be prepared, but he also had to send people to investigate the situation in the continent. After some consideration, he decided to let the East Barren Country handle this matter. Because the cities of the East Barren Country had set up formations and restrictions last year, the mystic cultivators of each country didn't need to guard the palaces anymore. With the help of the magic boats, they were now going on expeditions to wipe out the surrounding demons. The situation was very different from before, and they had enough manpower and strength to do this. In the shocking Sky Mountain, just as the king of the same clan, Fu Zhe, had predicted, after the second talisman from beyond the sky fell and promised the tribes to guard their territory, the tribes indeed didn't mention checking the authenticity of the talisman. Under the push of the 3 families, the expedition to the northern cold abyss seemed to be unobstructed. But at this time, Sima Quan was silent and didn't take any action. Because he knew that the 3 families of the king's city must be suspicious of what he did, and they were probably searching in secret. Before the news died down, it was not a good time to take action. Moreover, it would take at least 10 years to truly unify the thousands of tribes. During this period, he still had many opportunities, so there was no need to rush. In the Heavenly King's city, the king of the clan, Fu Zhe, was discussing with the 9 elders of the king's city about the expedition. Fu Zhe said, "Elders, we can't afford any mistakes in this expedition against the cultivators from beyond the sky. I want to send a tribe to the northern cold abyss to clear the way for our tribes. Elders, which tribe do you think can take on this responsibility?" The thousands of tribes of the heavenly ghosts couldn't all attack the frigid Jade Ocean province at once, so they had to first occupy a territory above the northern cold abyss and build the World Reflection Tower, so that they could continuously send their clansmen up. Sui Qingjian said, "If we mobilize from within the earth, it will waste time and energy. Why don't we send the tribes near the northern cold abyss? Fu Zhe asked, which tribes are suitable? Sui Qingjian said, the Baking tribe, the Ken tribe, and the Chu tribe are all suitable. Fu Zhe thought for a while and said, then let the 3 tribes go together. Give them 100 world reflection towers, and it won't be difficult to defend a territory. He then said with pity, but it's a pity for the Shanyang tribe. The Shanyang tribe was originally a chess piece placed here by the ancestral tribe. After thousands of years of operation, they were extremely powerful. When he received the letter asking for help, he wanted to play with them a little, but he didn't expect them to be destroyed by the cultivators from beyond the sky so quickly, causing the earth abyss to be taken away, and they lost a great foothold. Qi Hua said, my king, the Shanyang tribe is like the other tribes from beyond the mountains, they have long been disobedient. I think it's a good thing that they were destroyed. But if the other tribes know about this, without the protection of the king's city, no matter how powerful they are, they won't be able to do anything. Why feel pity? Fu Zhe nodded, well said, Elder Qi, let bygones be bygones, it's useless to dwell on it. If we can defeat these cultivators from beyond the sky, not just the Shanyang tribe, even 10 or even 100 of them would be able to do it. Lian Shao, the clan master of Lian clan, stood up and said, my king, if the 3 tribes can work together, even if they are not as powerful as the Shanyang tribe, they won't be too far behind. But if the few powerful ones among the cultivators from beyond the sky are willing to help. Sui Qingjian said, Elder Lian, you are worrying too much. Who do you think they are? Why would they help us? The reason why he made such a judgment was because, logically speaking, the threat that these 3 clans brought to the sects of the 9 continents was actually not that big. And when one's cultivation base reached a certain level, they should also respect their identity, so how could they personally go into the field to compete with small pawns? Qi Hua, however, stood up and said coldly, my king, the cultivators from beyond the sky cannot be judged with common sense. I think we must be careful. Yu Zhe grunted and said, that makes sense. He looked at the 9 clan elders and said, I will go to the small pond sea to offer a sacrifice and awaken that one. I will ask her to come out and fight for me. That way, I can guarantee our safety. The elders were shocked when they heard this. Sui Qingjian asked carefully, my king, although this one has made a promise to our tribe, if she knows the enemy is strong, will she harm us instead? Fu Zhe said, as long as the Gui ancestors are here, she will not dare to do anything. With her protection and the help of the World Jian Pagoda, the 3 tribes will be fine. Seeing that he had made up his mind, the elders who wanted to persuade him swallowed their words. On the 2nd day, Fu Zhe led his people to the small pond sea. This place was named after the sea, but there was not a single drop of seawater. There was only a dry and cracked pit with a radius of 10,000 li. At his command, at least 1,000 great monsters comparable to the spirit manifestation realm were placed on the altar and their heads were chopped off. In an instant, blood flowed like a river. But strangely, no matter how much blood flowed into the pit, it disappeared immediately. It didn't take long for the 1,000 great demons to run out of blood and die. Fu Zhe's expression did not change. He summoned another 1,000 great monsters and continued to do the same. After killing 3 batches in a row, there was finally some movement from below. The ground trembled slightly. Then, the sun in the sky receded, leaving only a crescent moon hanging overhead. A soft voice came, descendant of Bobai, what can I do for you? Chapter 1294. When the heavenly ghost tribe awakened the demon forefather, the sects of the 9 continents were also making their preparations in an orderly manner. After the people of the heavenly abode obtained the pure purple spiritual opportunity, most of them began to refine it. As for the disciples of the heavenly abode, they were all carefully cultivating under the care of their masters, operating the external medicine in order to advance further. Over the years, with the help of the native creatures, the cultivators of the 9 continents had found quite a few external medicines that could be used as substitutes. Although they were different from the original, as long as they were slightly refined, they wouldn't hinder their cultivation. In fact, some of them were far more effective than the original ones. This was also reasonable. Most of the things in the world were formed from spiritual vigor. Since the spiritual vigor here could be used by cultivators, it was the same for external medicine. Even if there was a difference, the difference would not be too great. On this day, Zhang Yan didn't go outside the void sky. Instead, he went down to the mountain and sea realm and ordered someone to summon Jiang Zheng. Then, he brought him into the minor realm. Finally, he came to a lush mountain ridge and said loudly, "Is fellow Taoist Jingcang here?" The mountain peak shone brightly, and then a hexagonal palace floated out. With another flash, it transformed into a withered-browed, white-haired Daoren in a grey robe. He cupped his hands and said, "Greetings, fellow Taoist." Guru Lingya was dead, and he had lost his obsession. He had become one with the morning-shocking heavenly palace, so it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that this treasure had a true spirit. Zhang Yan returned the greeting and said, "Fellow Taoist Jingcang, today, I came here for this disciple." Jiang Zheng also came forward and bowed. "Greetings, Patriarch." Patriarch Jingcang glanced at him and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist, this disciple has inherited my sect's technique. If he succeeds, it will be of great benefit to Daoren. For Doran's own sake, I will also do my best to help him." Zhang Yan nodded. "Then I'll leave it to you, fellow Taoist." Patriarch Jingcang turned his head and said to Jiang Zheng, "My original body has long since ascended. Now, this separated soul will lend Qi to you and draw out a strand of the true meaning of the morning-shocking heavenly palace for you to comprehend. How much you can comprehend will depend on yourself." Jiang Zheng said, "This disciple understands." "You have to think clearly," Jingcang said. "This is extremely dangerous. Once the divine will enters your body, it can trigger thousands of thoughts and 10,000 thoughts. If you still can't comprehend it after exhausting it, you will fall into confusion. Even with Taoist Zhang's ability, it will be difficult to save you. In reality, you only need to look for a true artifact, and you can also succeed." Jiang Zheng's expression was solemn as he said, "This disciple has already thought it through. I hope that old ancestor can fulfill my wish." Zhang Yan smiled faintly. If just now Jiang Zheng's words moved him and his heart wavered, then he might really fail. Only when his heart was firm and steady could he not sink into the maze. With a flick of his sleeve, several wisps of purple aura flew in front of old ancestor Jingcang. This wisp of pure spiritual qi should be able to help that wisp of divine will last a little longer. Old ancestor Jingcang was moved. Purple pure spiritual qi. He knew that it wasn't easy to gather this qi. Taking a breath, he said solemnly, "Daoren will do his best. However, if this disciple of fellow Taoist doesn't wake up after 100 years, then he can't succeed." Zhang Yan nodded and said indifferently, "Everything depends on his own fate." Old ancestor Jingcang didn't say anything more. His body swayed and turned into a wisp of pure qi, flying toward Jiang Zheng. The latter stood motionless, allowing it to enter the space between his eyebrows. Then, he slowly sat down cross-legged. Zhang Yan rolled up his sleeve and brought him out of the small world. Returning to the Hall of Crossing Truth, he settled down in a cave residence on an island. Then, he cast a spell to summon all the inky flood dragons within a radius of several thousand miles, ordering them to protect this place. Only then did he rise up into the sky. He came outside. Just now, when he arrived outside the hall, he felt a restless qi dynamic. He turned around and saw that the daylight hall was filled with flames. This was the sign of qi dynamic rising. It wasn't hard to tell that there was a cultivator trying to break through the barrier and achieve the grotto heaven. He pondered for a moment. Duda was the only one in the daylight hall who had cultivated the fire dharma to such a level. However, it was still the time when the qi activity was rising, so it was hard to tell whether he would succeed or fail. Perhaps it would take several years or even more than 10 years for the result to be known. He flicked his sleeve and turned into a clear light that shot up into the sky, disappearing in a flash. 2 years later, the Western Absolute Domain collapsed. Ever since the heavenly ghost tribe's Lao Xian tribe migrated out of the ancestral tribe, they had been guarding this place for generations. Because of Lao Zhe's order, after 2 years of preparation, they had gathered their tribe members that were scattered in all directions. They were prepared to be the vanguard of their king and head to the northern cold abyss first. At the same time, the Kin tribe and the Chu tribe also moved out. However, the 3 tribes' territories were far apart, so they didn't meet each other. At this moment, the tribe king, Lao Xianli, was waiting in front of the palace with the tribe elders. According to the previous agreement, the ancestral tribe would send the World Reflection Tower here today. The Lao Xian tribe was not the Shanyang tribe. In the tribe, he was the only one who was comparable to a demon saint. Without the World Reflection Tower, not to mention the cultivators from beyond the heavens, the demons in the northern cold abyss were enough to annihilate their tribe. However, after waiting for a long time, the people of the ancestral tribe did not arrive. One of the elders was worried and asked, "My king, will they really send the World Reflection Tower here?" Lao Xianli was very calm and said, "If not, why would I agree to the ancestral tribe's request? The ancestral tribe will not treat this matter as a joke." He looked around and said, "I know that there are some people in the tribe who are not willing to give up their territory. Although I have moved to the northern cold abyss, you all need to know that the ancestral tribe can defend the royal city because of the World Reflection Tower. When we, the Lao Xian tribe, also have this thing, the territory we can occupy will be many times bigger than what we have now. From then on, we won't have to worry about the demons outside the tribe attacking us. In just 100 years, we can become a big tribe." His voice rumbled, and everyone on the plains could hear it clearly. As if encouraged by his words, millions of tribe members shouted with all their might. As if to respond to him, the clouds in the sky suddenly parted, and with a flash of light, a giant object appeared in the sky. Everyone looked up and saw that the object looked like an 8-armed spider. Those who were slightly knowledgeable would not be able to recognize that it was the tribe's famous, Dan Xing flying spider carriage, which was said to have the ability to carry mountains and move seas. The Heavenly Ghost tribe did not have the ability to refine magic tools, but for more than 10,000 years, due to the continuous killing of the defeated cultivators who came to this world, coupled with the rewards from the extraterrestrial forces, they had indeed obtained a lot of good things, such as the magic treasures carried by Lian Ji and the spider flying car in front of them. The flying spider carriage quickly landed on the plains. As the 8 arms flattened, dozens of giants carrying white jade towers walked out of the carriage with heavy steps. The World Reflection Tower. It's the World Reflection Tower. Lao Xianli and the elders were overjoyed. The ancestral tribe did not go back on their words and sent this item. At this moment, the cloud platform on the ship rose, and a red-robed elder appeared in everyone's sight. When Lao Xianli saw him, he was shocked and said, "Elder Sui Qing." He quickly led the elders forward and kowtowed, saying in fear and trepidation, "I am Lao Xianli's subordinate, Elder Sui." The Heavenly Ghost tribe had a strict hierarchy, and Lao Xianli's population was only a few million. Not to mention the ancestral tribe, they were far inferior to some of the big tribes. Among the thousands of tribes, they could only be ranked at the bottom. Even if he was as strong as a demonic saint, he still had to kneel before the ancestral tribe's elders. Sui Qingli stood on the top and looked down, saying solemnly, "Tribe leader Lao Xian, I have been ordered by the king to deliver the World Reflection Tower. There are a total of 33 big towers, and the little Xian Tower has more than 1,000. After you arrive at the northern cold abyss, you must arrange it as soon as possible to welcome the big tribes." Lao Xianli kowtowed and said, "Yes, Your Highness." Sui Qingli's expression softened a little when he saw how respectful he was. He signaled to the servants beside him, and immediately, someone beat the drum. Then, a dozen cloud whales of thousands of feet in size descended from the sky. The Heavenly Ghost tribe had tamed several cloud whale tribes. When the Shanyang clan went to the northern cold abyss, the ancestral tribe imprisoned a whale king in a secret place to prevent them from disobeying orders in the future. Unexpectedly, it came in handy now. This cloud whale can send your tribe to the northern cold abyss. Tribe leader Lao Xian, don't delay and depart as soon as possible. Lao Xianli was overjoyed. If they followed the normal procedure, it would take at least a dozen years for the tribe to go to the northern cold abyss. But with the help of the cloud whale, they could reach there in a short time. He quickly said, I have already prepared everything, we can depart now. When he gave the order, everyone in the tribe went up the back of the cloud whale. Although there were only 1,000,000 of them, it took half a month. Just now, they were all on the back of the cloud whale. At this time, clouds rose from the cloud whale's body, and when the clouds dissipated, there was nothing left. On the same day, the Kan and Chang clan also rode the cloud whale and went to the northern cold abyss. However, he didn't know that there was a beautiful diagram that almost covered the sky buried between the two continents. This treasure immediately activated the moment it sensed that something was trying to escape into the void. Both of them were teleported to chaotic space. Once they arrived there, normal Heaven Ghoul clansmen would have no chance of survival. Only people like Xiao Xianli, if they were lucky and their lifespan hadn't run out yet, might be able to teleport out after a few hundred or even 1,000 years. The three tribes disappeared into thin air. By the time the ancestral tribe noticed that something was wrong, it was already several months later. How can this be? Sui Qingjian frowned. The destruction of 3 tribes and the disappearance of tens of millions of clansmen was a small matter in his eyes. But the disappearance of hundreds of world reflection towers pained him greatly. The clan king's expression didn't change much. He thought for a moment and said, we underestimated our opponents. Sui Qingjian was shocked and said, my king, are you saying that these outer space cultivators did something? Lu Zhi said coolly, if it wasn't them, who else would have the ability to do so? Sui Qingjian frowned and said, in that case, we can't ride the cloud whale to the northern cold abyss. We can only borrow the artifacts we obtained in the past. Lu Zhi shook his head and said, we can't. If they have a way to deal with movement arts, they might be able to deal with artifacts. Sui Qingjian said in panic, then what should we do? Lu Zhi looked outside the palace with a trace of seriousness. In his opinion, there was always a way. What he was more worried about was that the tribe's previous attitudes might waver after hearing about this. Chapter 1295. The tribes will advance when there are benefits and retreat when there are dangers. This time, if there are some sneaky villains stirring up trouble in the northern sky, there may be another setback. Luo Zhi spoke of his concerns. The elders were also shocked. They were just thinking about how to send people to the northern sky cold abyss and didn't think that there would be trouble among the tribes again. Just now, with this reminder, they realized that this matter couldn't be underestimated. They all knew that it wasn't easy to raise their anger, but it was very easy to vent it. Even though the tribes couldn't openly disobey the higher world's edict, once they used it as an excuse to retreat, it would be 10 times or even 100 times more difficult to instigate. Luo Zhi's eyes darkened. We need to think of a way to regain our momentum. It seems that we have to change our previous plan. Sui Qingjian was shocked. King, you want to ask that person to come out? Luo Zhi said, although this is a bit overkill, only if I win one battle can the tribes be at ease. The elders lowered their heads and thought carefully. The pros and cons were indeed not easy to decide. Luo Zhi waved his hand. You may leave. The group of elders bowed respectfully and dispersed. Luo Zhi stood up from his seat. He came to the back of the hall and stood in front of a large profound pillar. A Taoist with a high bun on his head sat cross-legged under the pillar with a wooden expression. However, his cultivation level couldn't be seen because of the golden chains on his body. He said, True Sovereign Gua, I want to use this treasure pillar. I need your help. The Taoist glanced at him, then slowly reached out and placed his hand on the profound pillar. The pillar immediately glowed faintly. After a long time, the illusory image of a woman wearing a moon-white linen robe with her hair and feet bound appeared. She seemed a bit unhappy. She said, Descendant of Bubai, what do you want from me? Luo Zhi said, Ancestor Go Yu, there's a change in the previous situation. This king needs your highness to do something else. As long as it's done, this king will be rewarded. As long as it's done, the heavenly ghost tribe will release all of your people. The woman was silent for a moment. Then she said, "What is it?" Baja said, "Those cultivators from beyond the heavens have taken over the earth abyss, and the Heaven Ghoul clansmen who used to live there have been enslaved as well. I need Ancestor Holy Moon Hook to kill all of them." The woman said, "Not even your Heaven Ghoul clansmen?" Lu Jia calmly said, "This king is aware of the ancestral saint's power. I'm afraid that you won't be able to hold back. Since that's the case, there's no need to force it." The woman did not speak again. However, his figure suddenly faded away. Laksha knew that the other party had agreed. When he was about to leave, the Taoist who was called Immortal Gua suddenly said, "Cultivators from outer space are here? To be able to make you so fearful that you didn't even hesitate to invite the demon ancestor, this person must be very powerful." Kaja stopped and replied, "Then I'll have to disappoint true Lord Gua. Although you're also a cultivator, you're not from the same place. Over the past 10,000 years, you've seen many people like this." But the Taoist listened to him. Not only was he not disappointed, his originally lifeless eyes lit up as he said, "You came from somewhere else? If it's an enemy, it'll be easy to wipe them out." Presumably, King Xianbai would disdainfully leave and not bother to waste his breath. Now that he's come to refute me, it's enough to show that King Xianbai isn't as confident as he says. Kaja said indifferently, "Those people are a little different, but when have we Heaven Ghouls ever lost?" With that, he immediately turned and walked away. However, after a dozen steps, he heard the sound of laughter behind him. He slowed down for a moment, then sped up and left. Far west of the northern cold abyss, two streaks of light descended. It was when Qingxiang and Hibiko Higashi. The earth abyss was originally close to the western desolate region. Knowing that Heaven Ghouls would definitely attack, the Spirit Gate prepared to set up a formation here to prevent Heaven Ghouls from coming. When Qingxiang looked ahead and said, "I've heard that there's a natural barrier between the two continents. Looks like this is the place." What the two saw was a boundless fissure in the ground. It was also because of this place that the living beings of the mountain and sea realm were able to divide the continent into 4 territories and 4 territories. Like Heaven Ghouls King City and Shocking Sky Mountain, this place was also full of chaotic magnetic force. Without Xiong Jin, it would be impossible for ordinary demons and beasts to fly across. However, there were pieces of floating rocks here, and on them grew a type of plant called the abundant algae. It was born by relying on magnetic force, and it was the only thing that could float in the air. These floating rocks were as big as continents, and the small ones were hundreds of acres in circumference. They moved according to a unique pattern. If someone walked on them, they only needed to jump along these rocks to reach the other side. If the majority of Heaven Ghouls wanted to pass through and conquer the sects of the 9 continents, they either had to use a teleportation technique to go directly to the northern cold abyss, or they had to walk on these floating rocks. In the past, it was not that there were no demons who tried to destroy this object. It was just that there were too many rocks here. Even if they broke off and fell, they would erupt again from the ravine. As time passed, no one tried to do so. Dong Jinzi tried to fly and realized that with the ability of the Heavenly Abode's people, the magnetic force couldn't stop her. However, the mana used was several times more than before. She was only at the edge of the ravine. If she went deeper, she wouldn't be able to survive. If she went deeper, it was hard to guarantee that the magnetic force wouldn't be stronger. If she just crossed the 2 continents like this, she probably wouldn't be able to reach the ravine even if she ran out of magic power. When Qingxiang reached out and plucked some spirit algae. However, it didn't take long for it to turn into a pile of white ash, which quickly dissipated with the wind. Seeing this, Hibiko Higashi said, "It seems that the demons of the Mountain Sun clan were right. These spirit algae can only survive in the magnetic force. If they go anywhere else, they will wither and die." When Qingxiang said, "Everything has its own destiny. It's a pity that no one who has cultivated the techniques of the Taihao school is here. Otherwise, we would be able to find out the secret within." He wanted to try to bring some of the spirit algae back to refine it, so that he could attack the Western Desolate Domain in the future. Since it didn't work, then forget it. Even without the spirit algae, they still had many ways to get through this ravine. Going step by step was one way. Going outside the air barrier of the mountain and sea realm and directly landing in the western desolate domain was another way. At this time, Hibiko Higashi suddenly looked up and said with surprise, "Enlightened one, do you think that's the pure azure sky?" When Qingxiang looked up and saw a green cloud floating above. Indeed, it was no different from the pure azure sky he saw in the cold Jade Ocean Prefecture. He thought for a moment and said, "I heard that there is a large mass of pure azure sky above the western desolate domain. This thing can be separated and gathered. Perhaps it came from there." Hibiko Higashi said, "I heard that this thing can form a separate world. Why don't we go in and take a look? If possible, we can try to refine it and bring it back." When Qingxiang thought for a moment and then agreed. The two of them naturally wouldn't go in personally. Even if they had great divine abilities, they wouldn't recklessly enter a place they didn't understand. Therefore, they both created a clone and went in. At this moment, a silver light was coming from the west to the north. The person standing on the light was demonic ancestor Go Yu. At this moment, her qi and blood had been restrained to an extremely low level, so weak that it was almost undetectable. When she arrived at the ravine, it seemed that the chaotic magnetic force didn't affect her at all. She directly passed through it. Just now, when she was about to reach the northern cold abyss, she felt the pulling force of the beautiful Jikong painting. She couldn't help but frown and turn around a few times. However, this painting was the treasure of Honghe Monastery. Moreover, it was operated by Zhang Yan, Sect Master Qin, and Sect Master Yu. It was not something that she could see through alone. After staying here for half a day, she still didn't gain anything. She could only turn around and leave. After a few days, she finally arrived at the abyss. According to the agreement, she had to kill everyone here. In fact, if it wasn't for the previous agreement, she was very unwilling to do this. It wasn't that she pitied them, but that after demons and monsters returned to their ancestral bodies, their qi and blood could no longer be nourished by external medicine. They could only rely on themselves to cultivate, and this would take an extremely long time. It might only take an instant to kill an enemy, but from flying into the sky to activating a divine ability, it might take dozens or even hundreds of days to replenish the qi and blood used in the process. This was like using the strength to lift a mountain to move bricks. It was not worth it. However, when she was about to go down, she suddenly felt an inexplicable force protecting this place. She immediately knew that there was a powerful figure who was not inferior to her lurking here. She thought for a while. Just now, she had just woken up from a deep sleep, and her strength had not recovered yet. The odds of winning were really not big, so she didn't stay here anymore. Instead, she flew to cold Jade Sea region. If there was no one guarding there, she could explain to Yuzhe. Along the way, she happened to pass by the original sleeping place of bright light demonic ancestor. The land here was completely broken, and now there was only a vast ocean. After silently sensing it, she showed a surprised expression. If two great divines who had reached the level of demonic ancestor fought, just the qi that flowed out would not disappear even after 1,000 years. Even the blood that flowed down could benefit the water tribe here, and the whole tribe could prosper. However, here, she only felt the qi and blood of bright light demonic ancestor. There was no trace of the other person, as if he never existed. She knew that the cultivator from outer space didn't cultivate the method of qi and blood, but there was not even a little bit of qi left, which meant that his physical body was almost perfect. This kind of opponent was really terrifying. After hesitating for a while, she decided to take a look at cold Jade Sea region. A few days later, she arrived outside the continent, but before she got close, her body trembled, and she couldn't help but look up. There was a colossus hanging in the sky, and countless strands of purple qi were being drawn over by it before being slowly devoured into its body. In her opinion, the power of this monster was simply unfathomable. Even when she was at her peak, she couldn't defeat it, let alone now when she was weak. She sighed and had no choice but to retreat. When she came to an uninhabited island, she shook her hand and threw out a tall profound pillar. When Yuzha came out, she said, "In the abyss, there is a great divines who are not inferior to me guarding, so I can't make a move." Obviously, Yuzha had also thought of this possibility, so he wasn't disappointed. He took a step back and asked, "Then can ancestor sage Yuzha resolve the obstacle between the two continents?" The woman shook her head and said, "Descendant of Bo Bai, this time your opponent is not simple. Not to mention that there are no flaws in the arrangement, his strength is also unfathomable. I also want to help, but I can't. Maybe you can ask for help from outer space." Chapter 1296. Hearing that demon ancestor Goyu wanted him to plead for the upper realm, Lu Zhi frowned imperceptibly. He thought for a while and said, "How many enemies did ancestor Goyu detect in the abyss?" Ancestor Goyu said, "Only one, but his strength cannot be underestimated." Lu Zhi thought for a while and asked many more questions. Perhaps because he had not completed the task Heavenly Ghost Tribe entrusted to him, demon ancestor Goyu was very patient and answered all the questions in detail. Lu Zhi said, "Since this matter cannot be completed, then please wait for a few days in the northern cold abyss." Demon Saint Goyu said, "If you have other arrangements, then you need to hurry up. Although my previous investigation was done secretly, these cultivators from outer space seem to have many unfathomable methods. They might have already been alerted. If we're late, the situation might change." Lu Zhi said, "Thank you for your advice, Ancestor Goyu." He paused and said, "I have released your people." Demon Ancestor Goyu was surprised and said, "Aren't you afraid that I will break my promise?" Lu Zhi said calmly, "If Ancestor Goyu is unwilling, who in the world can force you? Using your people to threaten me is a bad plan. Now that I have a favor to ask, I should be more open." Demon Sage Bewitching Moon looked at him and said faintly, "Descendant of Bo Bai, regardless of whether you are being insincere or intentionally scheming, I owe you a favor." With that, her figure disappeared from the profound pillar. Lu Zhi withdrew his gaze and saw Daoist Guo's bright eyes, which seemed to contain an unprecedented sharpness. He frowned but ignored him. If it were not for the fact that his chi and blood were not enough to activate this abstruse pillar, and that this person knew many tricks and had some uses, he would have killed this person long ago. He turned around and returned to the temple. After sitting down, he fell into deep thought. His previous plans were thwarted one after another. If he did not find a solution and only relied on the tribes, it would be impossible to go to the northern cold abyss within a dozen years. It would not be surprising if he was delayed for dozens or hundreds of years. Instead of delaying like this, it was better to stake everything on one throw. He ordered his attendants, "Invite Elder Sui Qing here." Half an hour later, Sui Qingjian arrived in a hurry and saw Lu Zhi sitting alone on the throne as if he was thinking about something. He walked closer and said in a low voice, "Your Majesty." Yao Zhi raised his head, looked at Sui Qingjian, and said in a deep voice, "Elder Sui Qing, I want to awaken another Gue ancestor. Do you have enough sacrifices?" Sui Qingjian was shocked and asked, "Your Majesty, what happened?" Mo Zhi said, "I've underestimated those cultivators from beyond the heavens. I didn't expect them to be prepared, so demonic ancestor Go Yu's trip was in vain. However, it's not like we didn't gain anything. At the very least, we found out a lot about the situation. There's only one person guarding the Earth Abyss. If there's another ancestral saint working together with demonic ancestor Goyue, we might be able to accomplish this." Sui Qingjian pondered for a moment and said, "There are enough offerings, but when does His Majesty need them?" "The sooner the better," said Loz. "Make some preparations, I will leave after noon at the latest." Sui Qingjian asked again, "May I know which ancestor saint the king wants to awaken?" Loz said, "The ancestor of the Shan Yang clan. How about ancestor Huazong?" Sui Qingjian looked hesitant. Loz asked, "Elder Sui Qing, do you have anything to say?" Sui Qingjian coughed and lowered his body. He lowered his body and said, "I heard that this ancestor Huazong is a hot-tempered person and likes to do great things. If he wakes me up, should I listen to him or not?" Loz said, "That's why I want to ask him to come out just now." If he knows that the Shanyang clan has been enslaved, he won't be indifferent. As for asking me to listen to him, it's just asking me to follow him to fight against the cultivators from beyond the heavens. That's exactly what I want. I'd like to see how many people dare to oppose this demonic ancestor. As long as he succeeded this time, the tribes would not be allowed to retreat. It would be best if the cultivators from beyond the heavens took the initiative to attack after suffering a great loss. Sui Qingjian suggested, Your Majesty, since you want to invite the ancestor saint to fight, why don't you wake up the others as well? That way, we will have a higher chance of winning. Currently, the offerings that we have stored are barely enough. Loz shook his head and said, To wake up all the ancestor saints of my heavenly ghost tribe, it would be a matter of life and death. Obviously, it's not the right time yet. He knew very well that the reason why the Gui ancestors were sleeping was to accumulate strength so that they could break through the heavens. Now that they were all awakened, it was very likely that they would be annoyed. Moreover, the edict from beyond the heavens did not mean much to them. Sui Qingjian thought for a moment and bowed, I'm willing to obey your majesty's command. Loz said, Go and prepare. Half an hour later, Sui Qingjian led several elders out of Shocking Sky Mountain with the offerings. It took them 2 days to arrive in front of a bottomless pit. This was the place where the Firemane monster ancestor was sleeping. Unlike demon ancestor Goyu, there was a towering qi and blood barrier outside. When they were a few miles away, they felt a great pressure restraining them, making it impossible for them to get any closer. Loz stretched out his hand and took out a jade stone. This stone contained a wisp of the Firemane monster ancestor's blood. This was the only thing that could allow them to continue moving forward. He raised the stone and waved it in front of him. The blood barrier turned into a thin mist and slowly dissipated in 2 directions. He said, Follow me. Immediately, we gathered our blood and rushed into it. All the elders knew that although the qi and blood had retreated, it had only lasted for an instant. Therefore, they didn't dare to stay here for too long. One by one, they activated their divine abilities and charged into the pit. When they arrived before the pit, they methodically laid out the sacrificial offerings. Ignoring the screams and howls of the demons, they killed them all. The boiling blood converged into a river and flowed into the ground. However, after a day, more than 10 batches of offerings had been sent up, but there was still no movement from below. Sui Qingjian was very puzzled. He approached Loz and said, Your Majesty, these offerings are enough to awaken the 2 monster ancestors. Why hasn't the Firemane monster ancestor woken up yet? Loz looked down and said, It's not that he can't wake up, but he doesn't want to. This ancestor saint just doesn't think these offerings are enough. Elder Sui Qingjian, offer all the offerings you have. If it's still not enough, kill a few of the spirit beasts I have imprisoned and offer them. Sui Qingjian obeyed and went to make the arrangements. After offering all the offerings they had brought, the ground beneath their feet suddenly began to shake. The mountains in the distance began to shake, and rocks began to collapse. After several hours of shaking, a large rock slowly rose into the sky. On the rock stood a handsome man with long black hair that reached his waist. This man had broad shoulders and a thin waist, and the muscles all over his body were bulging. He seemed to be full of strength, but the blood and qi in his body were restrained to the extreme, not revealing a single trace. His gaze swept across the crowd and finally landed on Lu Zhe. He said with displeasure, Just by looking at you, I can tell that you are a member of the Lao clan, a descendant of that old fart Dan Yin. Speak, why did you summon me? Sui Qingjian stood up and said, Ancestor Saint Ji, please allow me to explain. He explained the cause and effect in detail, emphasizing that the Mountain Sun clan had been destroyed and the remaining clansmen were enslaved by the cultivators from beyond the heavens. However, Ancestor Saint Huazong was not angry after hearing it. Instead, he sneered and said, Do you think I will avenge the Ji clan because they were destroyed? Is that why you called me out? The Ji clan was the Shanyang clan. This clan originally had the surname Ji, but after they moved to the northern cold abyss, they changed their clan name to avoid being seen as foreign enemies by the beings of the northern cold abyss, so the ancestral clan of the Heavenly Ghost clan had tacitly agreed to this. For the past 10,000 years, they had been called the Shanyang clan. Sui Qingjian couldn't figure out Guizhu's temper and was afraid. He hurriedly said, "I dare not. It's just that these cultivators from beyond the heavens have several powerful divine abilities." After thinking about it, among the ancestor saints, only Ancestor Ji can solve this problem. Ancestor Huazong smiled faintly and said, "You're good with words. I know you don't think so, but it's nice to hear it. However, the cultivators from beyond the heavens are far away from the western desolate region and haven't attacked yet. Why are you in such a hurry?" Lu Zhi said, "It's only because the upper realm has issued an edict that we need to do this." Ancestor Huazong said disdainfully, "The descendants of the Ji clan are useless, that's why they were killed. You all are also useless. Did you just go when the cultivators from beyond the heavens asked you to go? I've said long ago that these people are not to be trusted." Lu Zhi said calmly, "Ancestor Saint Ji is so powerful that he doesn't need to obey the orders of the upper realm. However, the people of his later generations have benefited from the upper realm and have prospered for more than 10,000 years. If you don't obey, there will be a great disaster, so you have to do it." Firemane Ghost Ancestor glanced at him and said, "You're quite straightforward. Since I've woken up, it's time for me to move my qi and blood. I'll go to the abyss and eliminate those cultivators from beyond the heavens for you." Sui Qingjian hurriedly said, "Ancestor Saint Ji, His Majesty has already released Ancestor Saint Go Yu. If the two of you can join forces, there's a good chance of victory." Ancestor Huazong snorted and said, "I'll do whatever I want. It's not up to a junior like you to speak. Besides, I don't need help from others when I take action." He leaped up and the world seemed to tremble. A blood-red light soared into the sky and disappeared. Lu Zhi also understood that no outsider could control what a demon ancestor would do. It didn't matter if you agreed or disagreed, it didn't matter at all. It was also because of the previous failures that he had no choice but to use this method. He looked at the sky and said, "If we lose again this time, the battle against Northern Sky will only happen 100 years later." Chapter 1297. After summoning the Firemane Ghost Ancestor, Fengzhe led everyone to the shocking Sky Mountain. By now, the news of the destruction of the three tribes had reached the ears of the other tribes. Many of the tribe leaders wanted to enter the palace to pay their respects. Fengzhe knew that these people wanted to dissuade him from rushing into the abyss, so he decided to ignore them and send Sui Qingjian to beat them up. Before the outcome of the Firemane Ghost Ancestor's attack on the abyss came out, he didn't want to meet with the tribe leaders. If the Firemane Ghost Ancestor won, he would be able to suppress all the voices. If he didn't win, then he could only take it slow. However, just as he entered the palace, a bird flew over and landed on the ground. It transformed into a human, then knelt down and said in a panic, "Your Majesty, the Firemane Ghost Ancestor just now Ancestor Sage Firemane Ghost Ancestor came, but not only did he move the Vermilion Mountain from the Ancestral Temple, he also took the 10,000 World Reflection Pagodas." After hearing this, Fengzhe didn't seem angry at all. He waved his hand and dismissed the person. In his heart, he thought, although this ancestor sage is a bit impulsive and hot-tempered, he isn't stupid. The Firemane Ghost Ancestor left the western desolate domain, but he didn't rush to the northern frigid abyss. Instead, he turned into a streak of scarlet light and flew out of the air barrier of the mountain and sea realm. When he reached the void, he spread his limbs and stretched his body. Gradually, scarlet light shone from his body. From below, he looked like a blazing sun. He looked down a few times, and before long, he found the location of the abyss. He grinned and dived down. His charge was like a meteor falling from the sky, leaving behind a long fiery tail in the sky. The moment he broke through the air barrier, he fell into the lake like a boulder, causing an earth-shattering explosion. As the fire main demonic ancestor fell faster and faster, the vast blood chi on his body caused waves of shockwaves, causing the mountains and rivers to tremble. At this moment, all living beings in the mountain and sea realm were alarmed. They all looked up and saw a scarlet meteor falling from the sky. It rumbled down to the surface of the earth. Up in the sky, demon ancestor Go Yu stood calmly as she watched the scene unfold. She had been informed by Zhai Zhai. She knew that Gue Zhu had always acted in his own way and didn't like others interfering in his affairs, so if she went up now, it was more likely that the two of them would fight first. Even if he really wanted to intervene, he would have to find the right time. At this moment, in the abyss, the 5 spiritual gates spiritual masters were extremely nervous. With their sensing ability, they could naturally tell that the thing in the sky was heading towards them. The 5 of them immediately came out of their cultivation places and came to the palace hall of the Shanyang clan. Yuan Hongyang was not alarmed by this sudden change. He calmly said, "Honored masters, the enemy's momentum is ferocious. But we can't be careless. Everyone, please go and guard the various formation gates." There were many almighty divine abilities in the mountain and sea realm, and the western sky Badlands heavenly ghost tribe was their enemy. Therefore, after taking control of the earth abyss, the people of the spirit gate spared no expense in setting up a defensive spell formation to guard against enemies like the demon patriarch. Xue Dingyuan and the others shuddered and immediately turned into streaks of light, scattering in 4 directions. Yuan Hongyang took out an incantation and an array gate appeared in front of him. He stepped forward and arrived at the array gate. When he sat down, he flicked his sleeve. He took out the Netherworld River and placed it on the formation eye. When Xue Dingyuan and the others arrived at the Earth realm, they also took out their sect-guarding treasures and placed them on the array gate. Then, they poured their magic power into it. Without spinning. Outside the Earth abyss, layers of light surged out. This was the sign of the formation power surging. Not only that, but it also continuously sucked in the spiritual vigor from the Earth abyss and filled it. At the same time, the sound of rushing tides could be heard. Vast rivers flew over from all directions and gradually gathered in the sky above the formation to form the illusory image of a black tortoise that was as large as a mountain, half turtle and half snake. When the fire main demonic patriarch saw the changes below, he chuckled and hugged his head. He curled up his body, and the speed at which he was already falling increased by a few notches. After waiting for a long time, the two finally collided head-on. Within half a day, circles of ripples of light spread out. Not long after, there was a dull sound that sounded like a drum. This action caused an extremely tragic consequence. In just an instant, over 90% of the native living beings in an area of a few tens of thousands of kilometers had been killed, and the remaining few had fallen into a daze. Numerous corpses had floated on the surface of the rivers and oceans. After all, the illusory image that the black tortoise condensed was only an illusory image. Under the impact, it immediately shattered and turned into water. However, before it landed on the ground, it was evaporated by the blazing red fire and turned into steam. However, the fire main demonic patriarch was not unaffected at all. After being obstructed, the momentum of his charge was also weakened. In particular, there was a sticky force in the water mist that did not dissipate. Under such weakening, when he collided with the formation, he only had half of his original strength. With a rumble, the formation shook. The light was like a candle in the wind, flickering. However, it did not dissipate after all. Because the spiritual gate was only built a few years ago, its foundation was not strong. Fearing that it would destroy the spiritual opportunity of the earth vein below, Yuan Hongyang and the other 4 did not forcefully take on the impact. Instead, they diverted most of the impact away. Within a radius of a few 100,000 miles, countless mountains and continents were destroyed. There were also countless tsunamis and storms. Even so, when the remaining impact spread into the formation, the 5 of them felt their chests tighten. Their images also changed a few times. At this moment, the fire main demonic patriarch's body had already stopped, but he was blocked outside the formation. He could not help but feel surprised. According to his original plan, as long as he charged into the abyss, even if the person guarding the formation would be fine, the other juniors would not be able to survive. However, he did not expect the result to be like this. He could not be blamed for his miscalculation. For more than 10,000 years, cultivators from beyond the heavens only came here sporadically. Then, they were captured by the heavenly ghost tribe and other living beings and were either killed or expelled. There had never been a move to build a formation here. Furthermore, he had been in a deep sleep for a long time, so he did not know about this. Otherwise, he would not have charged down so easily just now. At the very least, he would have used a few spells. Just as he was about to break the formation in front of him, he suddenly felt a sense of danger. He saw a huge snake breaking through the clouds and biting toward where he was standing. He wanted to block and capture it, but the snake was extremely agile. With just a turn and a bite, it tore off a piece of flesh from his arm. The wound was so deep that it even revealed the golden bones below. The fire-mane demonic patriarch's body had long been cultivated to the undying state. Even if he was injured, he could immediately recover. However, for some reason, the wounds seemed to be blocked by an invisible spiritual vigor and could not heal. Although the spiritual vigor was being worn away bit by bit, it was obvious that before the spiritual vigor was expelled, the injury could not be healed. He just casually glanced at it, snorted, and no longer looked at it. The snake attacked again, but this time, he revealed a cruel smile. He didn't dodge and allowed the snake to pierce through his chest. Then, he grabbed it, and just as he was about to tear it apart, it suddenly turned into a stream of water and flowed through the gaps between his fingers. He let out a low roar, and the blood in his body surged. Scarlet flames sprayed out, and it evaporated into gas. However, the gas that floated above condensed, and the snake reappeared. The fire-mane demonic patriarch was startled. 2 pairs of eyes opened above his head. The eyeballs rolled a few times and suddenly shrank. He said, "Spiritual vigor accumulation?" Such a thing, as long as there was spiritual vigor, even if it was scattered, it could be gathered again by the 5 elements in the world. Usually, only natural divine creatures could have such ability. Such a thing, no matter how many times it was killed, as long as the source was not destroyed, it would not really die. To deal with it, the most reliable way was to seal it. The fire-mane demonic patriarch obviously did not have such a method, but he used an even more violent method. With a sway of his body, he transformed into the form of a heavenly ghost. He had 3 limbs, crimson skin, and exposed fangs. Dazzling sparks danced on his shoulders, and he blew out a gust of fire chi to burn the snake again. Then, he took a deep breath. Within 1,000,000 miles, apart from the abyss that was protected by the formation, the mountains, rivers, grass, trees, sand, stones, rivers, lakes, and seas all flew toward him and were swallowed by him. His gaze swept across the area, and sure enough, without anything to rely on, the snake was no longer able to materialize around his body. With an extremely arrogant laugh, he was about to charge towards the formation. At this moment, his eyelids twitched and the hair on his body stood up. It was as if an incomparable danger had befallen him. That danger seemed to originate from the heavens. How could he not know that he was facing some other powerful enemy? Thumping his own chest, he let out a loud roar as he grew taller and taller. Before long, he was taller than all the mountains in the realm. He stamped his foot down onto the ground, then stretched his right arm out through the air barrier of the mountain and sea realm and made a grasping motion. Even the devilish beings that were millions of kilometers away felt their hearts tremble at the sight of this, and they couldn't help but fall to their knees and kowtow repeatedly. However, only a few breaths later, an even more shocking scene appeared. An enormous hand descended. Compared to this enormous hand, the rivers and seas were like shallow ponds, and the mountains were like specks of dust. The fire-mane demon king looked like nothing more than a slightly larger toy. The hand grabbed him, and then dragged him out of the mountain and sea realm. It's Shinrin Zhang. The 5 perfected cultivators of the spiritual gate were excited when they saw this. Taoist Master Wei still had some lingering fear in his heart. That Guizhu is so powerful. If it weren't for Jinren Zhang's divine ability, the grand formation wouldn't have lasted much longer. When Qingxiang cautioned, everyone, we can't be careless. Rumor has it that the Heavenly Ghost Tribe has several monster patriarchs. Even if Daoist Zhang takes him away, there's no guarantee that others won't come. Even as they were speaking, they suddenly felt the sky above them grow dark. It was as if day had suddenly turned into night. A bright crescent moon hung high in the sky, and then they saw a woman in white, who had been shackled, appear outside of the abyss. Chapter 1298. Demonic forefather Go Yu was outside the abyss. Just now, she was about to descend when she saw the phantom of a half-turtle, half-snake divine beast. She frowned and stopped in her tracks. Just now, in order to prevent the Fire Mane ghost ancestor from finding her, she had watched the battle from afar. She had only seen the phantom of the black tortoise shatter. She had thought that even if it wasn't dead, it would be gravely injured. If she went down and wiped out everyone inside, she would have accomplished the task entrusted to her by the Heavenly Ghost Tribe. But now, it seemed that the Guardian of the Abyss hadn't weakened in the slightest. Clearly, he still had his battle prowess. She looked at the grand array in front of her and hesitated. Even the Fire Mane ghost ancestor couldn't break this barrier, let alone the one in front of her. She had no chance. Moreover, the owner of the giant hand was truly terrifying. At that moment, she suddenly felt a sharp light pointing at her from afar. It seemed that if she took another step forward, it would fall. Just as she was feeling bewildered, a clear voice rang out in her mind. You came here a few days ago. Seeing that you didn't attack, I'll let you go today. It's not too late to retreat now. Don't make a mistake. Demonic forefather Go Yu sighed and silently retreated. The crescent moon in the sky also disappeared into the clouds, and the world became bright once more. The black tortoise saw her leave, and its figure also slowly faded away. Although Go Yu had left, the 5 spiritual masters of the Spirit Gate didn't relax and continued to guard the Array Gate. Yuan Hongyang said in a low voice, ever since Spiritual Master Liang left, the Spirit Gate no longer has a mortal metamorphosis cultivator. Even though we have a foothold in the mountain and sea realm, even demons and ghosts dare to bully us. We still have to rely on the spiritual masters of other sects to protect us. This situation needs to change. He waved his sleeve to open the Array Gate and sent a jade slip to Xue Dingyuan. Sect Master Xue, your cultivation is the highest among the 6 sections. This is the experience of the previous spiritual masters of the Netherspring sect before they broke through. I'll lend it to you. Xue Dingyuan didn't reach out to take it. Instead, he bowed and said, I'm afraid I'll fail you. Yuan Hongyang said, Sect Master Xue, just do your best. Our spiritual gate's momentum is different from before. We must abandon our sectarian bias. In the future, if any enlightened master cultivates his nascent embryo, he will be the first one to do so. If any spiritual master cultivates the nascent soul core, you can take it. The expressions of the other 3 changed slightly. Such a secret tome was extremely precious, and they had never thought that Yuan Hongyang would actually take it out for everyone to see. Such breadth of mind and boldness were truly rare. Sect Master Xue Dingyuan. And said, Sect Spirit Xue Dingyuan. Our spirit sect wants to take over this area without a mortal guarding it. Sect Master Yuan is thinking for our spirit sect. Sect Master Xue, if you succeed, it will be beneficial to everyone here, don't decline. Dingyuan thought for a moment, Forefather Father Emperor, and Dingyuan. Outside the barrier of the mountain and sea realm, the Fire Mane ghost ancestor saw that he was being held in the palm of someone else. Fire, to mountain. To the mountain, to God Mountain, God, Ghost Fire, Mountain, Fire Father, He, Fire Father, Ghost. Flame God God, to, King, Flame Ghost, Ancest, God, God, outside, He. This action consumed a lot of chi and blood, but before he left the Western Absolute Domain, he purposely went to the startling Sky Mountain and moved the Vermilion Mountain that was placed in the palace. This mountain was an extremely huge blood medicine. It was sacrificed the lives of several cultivators from outer space to the upper realm in exchange for a method to refine the blood chi of the demon ancestors. At that time, several Gui ancestors worked together to capture almost all of the slumbering monster ancestors in the Western Desolate Domain. After that, he used this method to refine several Vermilion Mountains. Now that he had one with him, it was equivalent to having a demonic ancestor continuously replenishing his vitality, allowing him to unleash his full strength without any worries. However, something happened that shocked the Fire Mane Ghost ancestor. Although his body had grown, his hand had also grown. It actually changed along with him, looking no different from before. It was as if no matter how he struggled, he couldn't break free. He let out another roar, and rays of crimson light shot out from his body. This was the Son of Fire technique. Heavenly Ghost was the descendant of Bo Bai, and wielded the power of the Great Sun. This divine ability could boil rivers and dry up the earth. Flesh and blood simply couldn't withstand it. However, this technique still couldn't do anything to the giant hand. He could see that it wasn't that the technique didn't work, but that as soon as the flesh on the surface melted away, it would immediately grow back. Unless he exhausted his opponent's vitality, it would be of no use. However, he was using a divine ability, and if he continued, he would consume far more of his vitality than his opponent. Even with the Vermilion Mountain in hand, he would probably run out of vitality first. He was also ruthless. Seeing that this move was useless, he secretly circulated his chi and blood. The skin and flesh on his shoulder immediately burst open, and 2 hands grew out from it. He ruthlessly tore off one of his heads, raised it up high, and threw it outwards. Flesh and blood squirmed around the severed neck, and a new body quickly grew out. As for the body that was grabbed by the giant hand, it turned into a puddle of blood and attempted to gather on his new body. However, at this moment, a black flame suddenly appeared on the giant hand. With a light flick, it swallowed all the blood and chi, leaving not a single drop behind. The Fire Mane Monster King saw this, and his ferocious face twitched slightly. After cultivating the Ghost Ancestor technique, every drop of vitality was extremely important. Now that he had lost so much, it was equivalent to losing half of his body. If he cultivated it normally, it would take 4,000 or 5,000 years. If he didn't have the Vermilion Mountain in hand, he would probably have no choice but to retreat. At this moment, he looked up and finally saw the owner of the giant hand. It was a young Taoist with fluttering sleeves, standing in the void. Behind him was an incomparably huge demonic image. As the figure gradually disappeared, the originally blurry demonic image also became clearer. However, it was very strange. He clearly thought that he had seen it clearly, but in his memory, he couldn't remember the appearance of the demonic image. It was as if he recognized it, but as soon as he turned around, he would forget it. Now that a powerful enemy was in front of him, he had no time to ponder the mysteries. He shook his vitality, and his skin became dark red, and the light that surrounded his body previously disappeared. This was the divine ability, Blazing Spirit. Once he used this art, he would be able to unleash his full strength until his blood and chi were completely exhausted. As time went by, the power of the divine ability would grow stronger and stronger until he completely exhausted his chi and chi. The longer he delayed, the stronger he would become. Usually, no one would be able to block it. Zhang Yan was hidden in the demonic image, and only used his divine will to activate his various techniques. At this moment, he saw an opportunity, and the demonic image deeply inhaled towards the enemy. The Fire Mane Ghost Ancestor felt his body sink, and his soul fluttered as if it were about to be blown away. He was shocked. This feeling was similar to when he had tried to break through the Heaven-Earth Pass. He quickly circulated his chi and blood, and stabilized his soul. Shocked and suspicious, he said, "What kind of divine ability is this? It can actually absorb my soul. Luckily, I've already experienced 3 transformations, otherwise I would have fallen into his trap." When the living beings of the mountain and sea realm reverted to their demon ancestor form, they would often attempt to break through the Heaven-Earth Pass. If they failed, they would be seriously injured. However, If they could recover, their strength would increase, and their soul would also strengthen, making it difficult to shake them. In the Heavenly Ghost tribe, other than the first Heavenly Ghost, the Fire Main Ghost ancestor was the oldest. When the Heavenly Flame descended and the Heavenly Decree came, he had personally witnessed it. It was also at that time that he was lucky enough to be bestowed with a treasure that allowed him to recover his vitality in a very short period of time. Even the demon ancestor Radiant Brightness had only attempted to break through the Heaven-Earth Pass once. After that, he had slumbered to recover his vitality. However, he'd relied on this treasure to collide with the Heaven and Earth barrier 3 times in a row. Even though he'd returned with heavy injuries, he'd benefited from this treasure, allowing him to recover every single time within 2,000 to 3,000 years. Moreover, his strength had improved by a level, and his soul had become even more firm and stable. According to the rumors, if one could survive 9 times, they could truly go to the Heavenly Ghost tribe, and live a free and unfettered life. Originally, all he had to do was wait patiently, and one day he would be able to achieve his goal. There would be no need for him to worry about the Heavenly Ghost tribe. However, he had received a treasure from the Heavenly Ghost tribe, which was karma. He could sense that if he didn't find a way to repay it, he would never be able to escape. Therefore, regardless of whether he was willing or not, once the Heavenly Decree came, he would be dragged into it. After withdrawing his soul, there was a hint of fear in his eyes. He grew his body to the same size as the demonic image in front of him. He spread his 6 arms, and chi and blood surged out of his body, condensing into axes, spears, hooks, and other weapons. With a roar, he charged forward. When Zhang Yan saw that he couldn't capture the demonic image's soul, he knew that the demonic image's foundation was stronger than Radiant Brightness's. It was difficult to injure it, so he didn't use it. With a thought, the demonic image leaned forward and reached out to grab it. The baleful aura around its body instantly turned into a giant hammer, and it fiercely swung it, colliding with the demonic image. Boom! In an instant, the giant hammer in the demonic image's hand shattered, and black smoke spread everywhere. One of the flaming main ghost ancestors' arms was also reduced to pieces of flesh and blood. However, he didn't seem to feel it at all. The remaining 5 arms continued to control the weapons, slashing at the demonic image's giant body like a madman. At this moment, the demonic image's other palm suddenly slammed forward. With a loud explosion, the flaming main ghost ancestors had exploded into countless pieces of flesh and blood. However, the demonic image's body was also torn apart layer by layer, becoming riddled with holes. But as the baleful aura was destroyed, it constantly reformed. In just a moment, the flaming main ghost ancestor's head grew out from his shoulder, but in the blink of an eye, half of his body was smashed into pieces, and in another instant, it was as good as new. On the demonic image's side, it was the same. No matter which side was injured, it would definitely recover in the next moment. The flaming main ghost ancestor could already see that his opponent also had an immortal body, so his offensive divine arts weren't very useful. Thus, he abandoned all kinds of complicated changes and used the most brutal method to fight with his opponent. He wanted to see who could last longer. Zhang Yan didn't try to change tactics. Instead, he used the demonic image to fight. Although they seemed to be evenly matched, as soon as the flaming main ghost ancestor's blood chi left his body, it would be absorbed by the black smoke around the demonic image, which would then replenish itself. Therefore, Zhang Yan wasn't worried at all. The 2 sides continued to fight, and the more they fought, the more intense the battle became. There were quite a few asteroids floating in the air above the mountain and sea realm, but they couldn't withstand the power of the 2 sides. One by one, they shattered into tiny pieces that fell down to the ground. The living beings of the mountain and sea realm looked up into the sky, and saw that it was as red as blood. The light of the sun and moon dimmed, and meteors fell from the sky like rain. For a moment, it seemed as if heaven and earth were collapsing, and a calamity was about to descend. Chapter 1299. Outside the void, the battle lasted for a whole day. The fire main monster ancestor gradually felt tired, and the madness in his eyes faded a little. He was shocked to find that he had lost more than half of his qi and blood. He could still maintain his battle strength on the surface, and even become stronger with the support of his divine ability, but he had lost a lot of qi and blood. He was confused. Normally, with his abundant qi and blood, he should be able to last for months. Now that he had lost so much qi and blood, it could only mean that he had fallen into the enemy's trap. He puffed up his chest, and the essence qi from Vermilion Mountain flowed into him again. His qi and blood flowed rapidly, and with a rumbling sound, he replenished his qi and blood. However, he also became more cautious, and soon realized that as soon as his qi and blood left his body, it would be silently absorbed by his opponent, unable to return to him. He was both shocked and enraged, and he let loose a furious roar. At the same time, he shook his shoulder, and the head on his left abruptly grew larger before biting down on the demonic projection. Zhang Yan's eyes flashed slightly when he saw him coming over, but he didn't dodge. Instead, he used his spirit to guide him and went with the flow. The upper half of the demonic form immediately turned into wisps of smoke and rushed into his throat. Just as the fire mane ghost ancestor swallowed the smoke, his body felt incredibly uncomfortable, as if it was about to melt. Knowing that the situation was bad, he reached out with one hand and tore the head off. However, he was afraid that Zhang Yan would absorb the blood qi, so he held it in his hand. The smoke continued to enter his body, and it could be said to be all-pervasive. If this continued, it would not take long for it to occupy his entire body. Left with no choice, he chopped off the other half of his body. However, as soon as it separated from his body, it turned into countless wisps of blood qi, and the black smoke immediately came out from within. In the blink of an eye, it was completely devoured. The fire mane monster ancestor was furious, but there was nothing he could do. He shook his body, and the head that just now had grown back. In order to prevent his qi and blood from being absorbed again, he secretly used a ghost perception technique. At most, he could create 3 copies of himself. Although this would consume a lot of blood energy, it was still better than being absorbed by the other party. After fighting for half a day, the fire mane demonic ancestor saw that his qi and blood were getting thinner and thinner. Zhu Shan was less than a third of his original strength. It was not enough for him to fight for a day, so he decided to retreat. The cultivators from beyond the heavens have a strong origin qi. His divine abilities are also extraordinary. I fear that I won't be able to defeat him before I use up all of my Vermilion Mountain. I'll retreat for now and find another opportunity in the future. He felt that he had underestimated his opponent this time. If he had made sufficient preparations or brought another Vermilion Mountain with him, perhaps the outcome would have been different. Fortunately, he went straight to the northern heaven cold abyss this time. But in fact, he had already thought of a way out. He had once taken 10,000 world reflection towers from the shocking sky mountain. Many of the cultivators from beyond the heavens who had come to the mountain and sea realm were equipped with protective magical items. Although the heavenly ghost tribe cultivators were roughly as strong as them, it was still very difficult to defeat them. Only by breaking the magical items or using up all of their magic power could they be subdued. In order to restrain them, the heavenly ghost tribe sacrificed the heavenly ghost tribe to the immortal realm and received the method to create the world reflection towers. Once the tower was completed, it could be used not only to protect oneself, but also to attack and injure enemies. From then on, the cultivators from beyond the heavens would no longer have any advantage. He felt that with the tower in hand, he could safely leave. But even if he wanted to retreat, he needed to find the right time. Several more hours passed. After attacking with no regard for energy consumption, he finally found a good opportunity. 2 of his clones took the initiative to charge forward, while he himself retreated slightly. He opened his mouth and spat out a blood-colored beam of light. More than 10,000 world reflection towers leaped out into the air, then transformed into beams of spiritual light that circled around him. As they rotated, they seemed to follow some sort of mysterious principle as they wrapped around him and retreated toward the mountain and sea realm. As long as he reached the shocking sky mountain, he would be out of danger. There were still 1,000,000 world reflection towers in the royal city, as well as a few vermilion mountains. Not only would that be enough for him to recover his vitality, but he also wouldn't have to worry about his pursuers. After Zhang Yan destroyed the 2 clones, he looked up and saw that the fire-mane demon forefather had already retreated far away. His eyes flashed as he used the Eye of the Sun and Moon technique. The fire-mane demon forefather was affected by this divine ability, and his forward momentum was halted. Zhang Yan had already driven his demonic form forward, and his fist was aimed at his back. The fire-mane demonic progenitor quickly opened his hand, and his chi and blood surged out and seeped into the World Inspection Pagoda. Under his control, the surface of the pagoda flickered with a red light, and the speed at which it flew back and forth suddenly increased by a few times. It actually absorbed and dissolved all the incoming force, and then flew out, crashing into Zhang Yan. Zhang Yan retreated slightly. Seeing that a direct attack was useless, he immediately changed his strategy. The demonic form's murderous aura transformed into chains that locked onto the World Reflection Tower in an attempt to restrain it. However, as soon as the chains landed on the tower, they seemed to meet with great resistance and were repelled. He raised his eyebrows, and after a few more careful glances, he couldn't help but smile. The reason why this item could do this was because the 10,000 pagodas were integrated into one. Once it was moved, it would move as well. For example, when the countless thin threads were gathered together, they could be condensed into one extremely tough thread. However, if a single thread was taken out, it could be easily torn apart. To deal with this item, one only needed to disturb its operation, and it would not be difficult to break it apart. If the person controlling this item was a cultivator from the 9 continents, it would not be easy to achieve this goal. However, the fire-mane demon forefather did not understand the profoundness of the pagoda, and only continued to pour chi and blood into it. All the changes were done by the World Reflection Tower itself, and the driving method was crude. On the surface, it seemed to be impenetrable, but in reality, there were too many flaws. The most important thing was that the World Reflection Tower itself did not have consciousness. If it were the magical treasures of the 9 continents, forget true treasures, or even profound treasures, because they already had consciousness, if the owner of the pagoda made a mistake, or was unable to react in time, they would be able to react spontaneously. However, without consciousness, they were dead objects, and the amount of power they could display would depend on the ability of the owner. With a push of his spirit, he once again split into tens of thousands of dark fiendish chains. This time, they wrapped around each of the World Reflection Towers. These chains looked the same on the surface, but they were completely different on the inside. Some were real, some were fake, some were soft, some were hard. Once the World Reflection Tower's power was at its peak, it would respond with the soft and fake chains, and once it was at its weakest, it would immediately wrap around it, making it impossible to escape. Soon, many of the World Reflection Towers were captured. This item originally relied on numbers to win. The fewer the number, the weaker its power. As more and more of the pagoda were captured, it gradually lost its original effect. The fire-mane ghost ancestor had never imagined that things would turn out this way, but he was quick to react. Seeing that the World Reflection Tower could no longer protect him, he immediately sent one of his clones to attack Zhang Yan, while he himself retreated toward the mountain and sea realm. Zhang Yan used the space of a few breaths to disperse the clone, then gave chase. The fire-mane ghost ancestor continued to flee, fighting and retreating, sending out dozens of clones to block Zhang Yan's path. As time passed, he gradually got closer to the mountain and sea realm. However, this short distance was like a heavenly moat that could not be crossed. By now, the vermilion mountain on his body had been used up, and there was not much blood chi left. He knew that he would not be able to escape today. At the last moment, he revealed his ferocious nature. Letting out a wild roar, he squeezed out the last bit of blood chi from his body and unleashed a flaming sun divine ability. At the moment, he was still under the influence of the primal blaze technique, which was several times more powerful than it had been before. It was as if a sun had exploded in the sky, and boundless blazing light radiated out in all directions. Zhang Yan knew that this was his final struggle. Circulating his magic power, he broke through the void and retreated far away. However, the devil aspect had already been touched by the light, and was being melted away. With the support of his magic power and divine will, it dissipated and regenerated. After a full moment, the scarlet light completely disappeared. At that point, he flew back to see that the fire main ghost ancestor had used up the last bit of blood chi in his body. By now, he had turned into a huge stone statue that floated in the void. In truth, the ghost ancestor was not truly dead. If a descendant of the heavenly ghost was willing to pour fresh blood on him, or sacrifice enough demons and devils, he could still be awakened. His gaze swept across the statue and he could see a wisp of godly soul residing within it. However, at this moment, it had no way of resisting the outside world. Thus, he commanded the demonic image to pull the godly soul out. The demonic slip between his eyebrows flashed and swallowed it. Then, with a wave of his sleeve, he shattered the fire main ghost ancestor. Even at this point, the ghost ancestor was not truly dead. If someone gathered the fragments and sacrificed blood at all costs, there was still hope for him to come back to life. However, putting aside how to find the ghost ancestor in the vast void, even if he really came back to life, he was nothing more than a walking corpse because his spirit was missing. Seeing that everything was fine, Zhang Yan was about to leave when he saw a white tablet floating out. It seemed to be something that belonged to the fire main ghost ancestor, so he picked it up. As soon as he held it in his hand, he could feel an extremely strong vitality coming from it. Just holding it in his hand, he felt his recovery speed increase. When he looked at it again, he saw that there were words engraved on it, but they were incomplete. It was obvious that the item was damaged. These words seemed to be erosion runes. They are definitely not something that the heavenly ghost could write. Perhaps I can find clues about the cultivators from beyond the heavens. I can check them when I get back. He put the white tablet away, broke through the void, and arrived at the place where the two had fought. Seeing the world reflection pagodas floating around, he waved his sleeve and put them all back. The biggest gain from defeating the fire main ghost ancestor this time was the world reflection pagodas. He had received a message from Sima Quan. If he wanted to break through the shocking sky mountain, the biggest obstacle was these pagodas. These pagodas were similar to the protective arrays of the cultivators of the 9 continents. They were used to protect the palace of the heavenly ghost's ancestral clan. If he could understand the mysteries of these pagodas, then the heavenly ghost royal city would be like a hard armor to the cultivators of the 9 continents. Chapter 1300. After defeating the fire main ghost ancestor, Zhang Yan returned to the Blue Sky Temple. He stood in the temple and looked down. Seeing that there was no movement in the mountain and sea realm, he knew that the heavenly ghost tribe had not made any other arrangements. Thus, he sat down cross-legged and adjusted his breathing for a moment. Then, he released his spirit and came to a nameless space to meet with the 2 sect masters. He told them that the enemy had been eliminated and that for the future battle, he also explained the various divine abilities of the fire main ghost ancestor in detail, including their strengths and weaknesses. In this battle with the fire main ghost ancestor, he had forced him to use almost all of his abilities and gain some understanding of the ghost ancestor. However, it didn't mean that he would be able to deal with him easily in the future. Apart from the first heavenly ghost that appeared after the creation of the world, the other ghost ancestors had all returned to their ancestral bodies, so there were still differences between them. Yu Xianxiao said, in Sect Master Zhang's opinion, will the heavenly ghost tribe make any more moves? Will there be another ghost ancestor attack? Zhang Yan replied, the 3 tribes have been destroyed, and the ghost ancestor has been killed. Unless the heavenly ghost tribe awakens all the ghost ancestors now, they won't pose much of a threat to the sects of the 9 provinces. According to the information revealed by fellow Daoists Sima and Lian Ji, the ghost ancestor's slumber is to accumulate blood qi. This is similar to a cultivator's seclusion. Unless something important happens, the tribe can't wake him up at will. If they really do that, there will be more than 1 ghost ancestor this time, so the possibility of this is very small. Sect Master Qin said, rumor has it that there are 4 ghost ancestors. Now that Temple Master Du Zhen has killed one, Major General will have one less enemy to deal with the Heavenly Ghost tribe in the future. However, there seems to be some external help in this tribe. Zhang Yan nodded. That white-robed woman is full of monster qi. She is not as strange as the Heavenly Ghost. Judging from her behavior, she can come and go freely. From what I can see, she is not enslaved by the Heavenly Ghost. Sect Master Qin said, if I can use her, Temple Master Du Zhen can try to win her over. Zhang Yan cupped his hands and said, disciple understands. He knew what Sect Master Qin meant. If he could rope this woman in, then he would try to rope her in. If he couldn't, then he could only kill her. Just now, when the demonic ancestor moon-seizing demon came, Sect Leader Qin and Sect Leader Yu actually had the chance to make a move, but the two of them were preparing for the Xian technique. If they were to take the time to fight with others, their mana would be depleted, and they would have to start all over again. Furthermore, that place was too close to the Earth Abyss and had just been ravaged by the fiery main demonic ancestor. If there were two more mortal metamorphosis level beings, it would be hard for it to survive. Hence, he only managed to scare them away. The discussion was quickly concluded. The two sect masters retreated, and Zhang Yan retracted his divine will. He opened his eyes and took out the jade tablet. Most of the words on the token were incomplete and difficult to complete. Only a few of them were still intact and recognizable. Upon closer inspection, there was no mistaking them. He thought about it for a moment and understood the meaning behind it. This Bai Gui was a ceremonial object, but as for what it was used for and who it originally belonged to, it was difficult to ascertain. However, this item could replenish Yuan Qi, so it could be considered a treasure. He tried to circulate his mana slightly. Immediately, he felt a surge of power entering from the jade. At the same time, the jade tablet decreased slightly. He nodded subconsciously. It seemed that the fiery main demonic ancestor had used this item many times in the past, causing it to be incomplete. It might have originally been obtained from the hands of the cultivators from outer space. This item was so magical, but it was a waste to only use it to recover his mana. He thought about it and put it away in his sleeve. Then, he sat on the meditation cushion and regulated his qi. After a few days, his divine qi had recovered. He stood up and waved his sleeves to go to the side hall where the Demon Interceptor Division was. The maidservant came forward and bowed. Master, I followed your instructions and replenished the blood medicine here every day. However, the blood medicine in the storehouse is running out. Zhang Yan's expression changed slightly. Oh, the blood medicine is running out? The maidservant said, yes, especially these few days. I have to replenish it more than 10 times a day. If this continues, I'm afraid it won't last for a month. Zhang Yan nodded slightly. I understand. You don't have to observe any longer. Just do as you have done in the past. He waved the maidservant away and walked forward. He saw that the Demon Interceptor Division's fur had a thin layer of light that was like blood or oil. Furthermore, there was an obvious fluctuation of aura on its body. However, it was still half dead. It was clear that it was still lacking a strong medicine. He pondered for a while and moved his mind. Black smoke and baleful aura surged out from behind him. Then, drops of fresh blood flowed out. This was the qi and blood absorbed from the fiery main ghost ancestor. After all, it was the ghost ancestor's blood. At this moment, he had not completely refined it, so he let the Demon Interceptor Division absorb it. This item was even more violent than the blood medicine. Although it contained limitless vitality, just a drop of it flowing into a river could make living beings flourish. When the Demon Interceptor Division sensed this blood, its body suddenly trembled. Then, slender mouths opened on its back and greedily swallowed the blood. As it sucked in the blood, its vitality surged. At the same time, its fur fell off layer by layer, and new flesh grew underneath. Seeing that it was about time, Zhang Yan flicked his sleeves and dispersed the smoke. The ghost ancestor's blood was enough for the Demon Interceptor Division to use for several years. If the Demon Interceptor Division couldn't recover by then, it would die from not being able to withstand the power of Ghost Ancestors' blood. There was no third possibility. He didn't look at it anymore. He turned around and left the hall. With a tap of his foot, he turned into a ray of light and landed in the floating heavenly palace. When he returned to the hall, he looked for Jing Yu and asked, "Has there been a letter from the Earth Abyss?" Jing Yu took out a letter and handed it over. "There was one half a day ago. It's here with me. I was about to show it to Master." Zhang Yan took the letter and read it. This letter was sent by Yuan Hongyang, stating that Guizu's body protecting array had been damaged by the collision and would need to be rearranged. As for the surrounding area of the Earth Abyss, it had been destroyed beyond recognition and needed to be rebuilt, so Yang Kai asked Black Tortoise to stay for a while longer. In fact, even without this letter, he didn't intend to summon Black Tortoise back. If the Heavenly Ghost Great Tribe came from the Western Desolate Domain, they would try to recapture the Earth Abyss first before attacking the Cold Jade Sea Province. Otherwise, no one would feel safe with this thorn in their back. Protecting this place was the most important thing right now. He put down the letter and said, "Go down and tell the disciples to send the array building treasures collected by the previous time to the Earth Abyss." Jing Yu asked, "Master, how many do you want to send?" Zhang Yan said indifferently, "Send as many as you can. The two sect masters and I are enough to take care of the Cold Jade Sea Province. If we can't stop them, the spirit array will be useless." Jing Yu hurriedly agreed. Zhang Yan thought of the World Reflection Tower and thought for a while before saying, "Go and summon the master of Baoyang Courtyard." Jing Yu bowed and went outside the hall to pass the order. After an hour, he came back and said, "Master, the master of Baoyang Courtyard has arrived and is waiting outside the hall." Zhang Yan said, "Send him in." After a while, a middle-aged Taoist with a square face entered the hall. He was the master of Baoyang Courtyard, Chu Gongtan. He was born in a small family and his cultivation was only in the second tier of Yuanying. However, he was very proficient in the art of artifact forging. He came to the bottom of the hall and bowed deeply, saying, "Chu Gongtan greets Hall Master Du Zhen. Due to a delay on the road, I came late. Please forgive me, Master Du Zhen." Zhang Yan said, "It's fine. As the master of a courtyard, Master Chu has many things to take care of. Moreover, the sea province is vast and there is no formation gate to transport people. It's quite fast to be able to come in 2 hours." Chu Gongtan relaxed a little and said, "Master Chu, what orders do you have for me?" Zhang Yan shook his sleeve and a spiritual light flashed. Immediately, more than 1,000 world reflection towers flew out and landed on the hall. He said, "Master Chu is an expert in artifact forging. You can come and take a look at these items." Although he also knew how to forge, as the hall master of Du Zhen, he did not have to do it himself. He only needed to say a word and someone like Chu Gongtan would come and do it for him. Chu Gongtan's eyes brightened, but he did not move immediately. Instead, he took out an octagonal bronze mirror from his sleeve and slowly walked to the front of a world-reflecting pagoda. He first focused his energy on his eyes, and after a few glances, he took out the bronze mirror and walked to the next pagoda. Zhang Yan did not disturb him and let him do whatever he wanted. Chu Gongtan did not find it annoying. He checked more than 1,000 identical world reflection towers. Then, he came back to his senses and bowed to the tower. He said, "Master Chu, this treasure looks similar to the artifact forging technique of the 9 continents on the surface. However, the inside is completely different. May I ask if it was made by a cultivator of this world?" Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Oh, can Master Chu confirm that it was made by a cultivator?" Chu Gongtan shook his head and said, "The person who made it was only following the diagram. Anyone could have made it. Although this item seems to be more suitable for people who cultivate qi and blood in this world, it is difficult to change the flesh and not the bones. After all, it is still suitable for cultivators." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "If I ask Master Chu to find a way to break this treasure, can you do it?" Chu Gongtan thought carefully and said, "It is not difficult to break one alone. However, this treasure uses one object to change into many things. The more there are, the more powerful it will be. There are many benefits to doing this. If the materials are of the highest quality and the refining method is brilliant, then the owner of the treasure can deal with any situation. As for the drawbacks, there are also many. If it is against an ordinary person, the rotation will be stiff. The thousands of pagodas in front of us only need to change the joints and can be broken with a true treasure. However, if there are more than 10,000 pagodas, and there is one item in the door, it can be done. Zhang Yan smiled and said, Master Chu, are you talking about the deep water of heavy depth? Chu Gongtan replied, yes. Zhang Yan thought for a while and asked, but what if there are more than 1,000,000 of these pagodas? Chu Gongtan frowned and calculated in silence for a while. Then, he answered, if there are more than 1,000,000 pagodas, then there will be more changes. The deep water of heavy depth can still be suppressed, but it may not be able to break it. However, it is not impossible. My Baoyang courtyard's first master, Chen Shaoguang, once left behind an item with great power. However, because there are a few missing materials from the ancient times, it has not been refined until now. If we can complete it, then it should be possible. Chapter 1301. Zhang Yan asked, what is the name of this treasure that Dean Chu spoke of? Chu Gongtan said, this water is called Hunhuan. According to Dean Chen's idea, any treasure refined from the 5 elements can be dissolved upon contact with it. Zhang Yan thought for a moment. If it really was that powerful, then he had to refine it no matter what. The mountain and sea realm was boundless, and there were countless spiritual items and treasures. The 9 continents couldn't compare to it. If he spent some effort, he would definitely be able to find something suitable. He asked, what is the method to refine this treasure? Chu Gongtan said, I've already memorized it. I can write it down. Zhang Yan was noncommittal and said, did Dean Chen leave a letter back then? Chu Gongtan said, Headmaster Chen left behind a jade scroll, which was previously kept in the Baoyang courtyard's offering pavilion. Before the realm was moved, it was sent to the small realm of the Daylight Temple to avoid losing it. If Xinren wants to take a look, I can go take a look later. Zhang Yan thought for a moment and said, there is no need. Headmaster Chu, please wait here for a moment. He took out a talisman and passed it to Jingyu, saying, take this to Xinrenhua. Dean Chen was a member of the Qin clan. The method to refine the treasure had never been given to the clan, so it was his own. Even though Huxian could order the Qin clan to give it to him, it would be difficult for Huxian to do this outside of the Daylight Temple. The talisman contained a strand of pure violet spirit. Exchanging a precious treasure for a treasure that no one had been able to refine for thousands of years wasn't a bad deal. Jingyu accepted the order and left. A short while later, he returned and said, Master, I've brought the jade slip back. As he spoke, he took out a jade slip from his sleeve and placed it on the table. Zhang Yan looked at it and saw that the jade slip was 3 inches wide. It was more than 2 feet long, and there were several mysterious etchings on it. It looked simple and heavy. Jingyu cupped his hands, Master. Master, this is a secret seal of the Qin clan. Only those with the bloodline of the clan can undo it. Hall Master Hua heard that old master needed it, so he asked perfected Qin Feng to come over. Just now, he has returned to his original appearance. Chu Gongtan was also taken aback when he heard this. As the monastery head, he did not know that there were other mysteries in the jade strip. In other words, it was very likely that what he knew was not only incomplete. Or there may be mistakes in it. Thinking of this, he frowned. Zhang Yan was not surprised by this at all and had even expected it. He had started from an inconspicuous lower house disciple and cultivated step by step to where he was today. He was well aware that many cultivators would set up such arrangements. It was not only the people of aristocratic families, but many masters and disciples would do the same. This was to prevent their secret techniques from being leaked, and at the same time, it was to prevent them from being easily obtained by other sections. He flicked his finger at the jade slip. A ray of light shot up from the sky and turned into a screen of light. densely packed words appeared on it. He took a closer look. According to Dean Chen's description, as long as he gathered all the precious materials and refined this water, and there was enough of it, he could indeed break through the death evaluation pagoda in one go. However, this treasure had a flaw. After the water was used, it would return to nothingness. If he wanted to use it again, he would need to refine it again. And the precious materials needed to refine it were all extremely rare. Obviously, it could not be used as an ordinary Dharma treasure. It could only be used as a trump card at a critical moment. But then again, as long as he defeated the heavenly ghost tribe, at least the east, north, and west continents would no longer be a threat. At that time, there would be no precious materials that could not be found, and he would not need to care about this. He waved his sleeve and sent the jade strip to Chu Gongtan, saying, "Dean Chu, is there anything else that needs to be added?" Chu Gongtan took a step forward and took it. After a few glances, a bitter smile appeared on his face. Compared to what he had seen before, not only were there many more precious materials, but even the refining method was more detailed and complicated than before. He could not help but blame this senior of his. If he only used the description he provided and refined countless precious materials to refine a pile of useless things, he feared that he would not be able to explain himself even if he had to sacrifice his life. However, the refining method of today was also much more brilliant than it was thousands of years ago. He carefully considered for a moment and also made a few pertinent suggestions. Zhang Yan said, "The refining of the treasure will be arranged by Dean Chu. As for the precious materials, the sect will find a way to gather them." Chu Gongtan said, "Then I will immediately start preparing after I return." Zhang Yan thought that many of the precious materials used to refine the Han Huan were taken from ancient plants. After ordering Chu Gongtan to leave, he left the hall and went to an island in the cold Jade Sea province. This was where the Danding courtyard was today. Although the Qinsang school had been established here for less than 10 years, the island was already full of strange flowers and plants, and there were even many plant spirits that looked like naughty children playing there. When Zhang Yan came over, there was a magnificent aura descending. These spirits were all startled, and they all burrowed into the ground, or retracted their branches, or curled up their bodies, not daring to show themselves again. Several mountain tops became bare in the blink of an eye. Zhou Chengju was walking in the medicine garden when he noticed the movement. He looked up at the sky and said with a smile, "It turns out that junior brother is here." Zhang Yan slowly descended, cupped his fists, and said, "Senior brother." He turned to look and saw two young men standing in the distance. Their gazes were filled with curiosity and respect. He smiled and asked, "Are those the two new disciples I've taken in?" Zhou Chengju smiled and said, "That's right, these two are Zhang Xianlan and Xing Qingshao, they both cultivate Jade Heaven sex techniques." He called out, "This is your martial uncle, why aren't you coming forward to greet him?" The two young people heard this and quickly came forward, bowed, and said, "Greetings, martial uncle." Zhou Chengju stroked his beard and nodded. Although these two disciples were under his tutelage, even if they didn't care about Zhang Yan's face, they still had to take into account Hall Master Duzhen's identity, so they were only counted as his grand-disciples in name. Zhang Yan nodded slightly. He flicked his finger, and two spiritual lights flew into the eyebrows of the two and said, "Since you are under Master Zhou's tutelage, I will give each of you a treasure. After you cultivate the mysterious light, you can refine it." The two young people were pleasantly surprised and bowed to thank him. Zhou Chengju saw that the two of them were trembling slightly. He knew that even if Zhang Yan had restrained his aura, it would still be difficult for them to stand firmly in front of him with their cultivation. He said, "The two of you can leave first." The two young people bowed respectfully, then left. Zhou Chengju asked, "Junior brother, you are taking charge of the situation on behalf of the sect leader. What brings you here today?" Zhang Yan explained the reason for his visit, and then said, "Junior brother, I've been thinking about it for a while. Since I can find more than half of the plants and vegetation from the mountain and sea realm, I've come to see if I can find some that I can use." Zhou Chengju stroked his beard and said, "Although I'm not an expert in equipment forging, when I was young, I thought that I was more talented than others, so I dabbled in the Tao. I know that when it comes to forging items, precious materials are the result of careful deliberation. If I were to hastily change them, they might not be completely useless, but there would definitely be some discrepancies. Since I originally used materials from the 9 continents, I might not be able to use the plants and vegetation from the mountain and sea realm. Oh, Zhang Yan said, from what you're saying, senior brother, you seem to have some other method? Zhou Changju laughed. I don't have any other method, but if I could get my hands on ancient plants and vegetation from the 9 continents, then I wouldn't need to replace them with items from the mountain and sea realm. Zhang Yan was surprised. I heard that those ancient plants and vegetation have long since gone extinct. Could it be that senior brother has some left behind? Zhou Changju laughed. Junior brother, back when you were in the Pill Cauldron courtyard, you knew that I loved collecting exotic plants and flowers. I found quite a few that had gone extinct in ancient times, but most of them had already turned into wood and stone. Although they looked dead, they still contained life force within them. With enough spiritual opportunity to nourish them for a few dozen years, they would come back to life. I had originally planned to wait until the sect had rid itself of its external enemies before making the necessary arrangements. But since junior brother is in a hurry, I might as well do it first. Zhang Yan was a bit surprised that the matter had been resolved so easily. Just now he knew that in order to raise such plants and vegetation, the amount of spiritual opportunity required would be enough to support several Taoists of the heavenly abode. No wonder he had been unable to grow them in the 9 continents. But now that he was in the mountain and sea realm, where spiritual opportunity was almost limitless, there were no such restrictions. I'll have to trouble you with this, senior brother, he said. Zhou Chengju said, it is my duty to help the sect. Zhang Yan came out of the Pill Cauldron courtyard, but he was not in a hurry to go beyond the heavens. At this moment, there was still one more thing he needed to do. Right now, there was still a demonic forefather lingering above the northern heaven frigid abyss. If he did not deal with it, he would not be at ease to leave. So he soared up into the sky and arrived outside the Qi barrier. He silently circulated his energy and looked around. 10 days later, he found his target. With a step, a clear light flashed, and he flew in that direction. At this time, demonic forefather Go Yu was on a cliff cultivating her qi and blood. Suddenly, she felt an incomparably tyrannical aura coming towards her. If her senses were right, it should be the person who had captured Flaming Mane Ghost Forefather. She was shocked and wanted to retreat, but the other party's aura was firmly locked in place. There was no way to escape. All she could do was stand in place and not move. After a short while, a grand clear light fell, and a handsome black-robed Taoist walked out. He glanced at her indifferently and bowed, saying, "Greetings, fellow Taoist." Demonic forefather Go Yu calmed her mind and returned the greeting with the clan's etiquette. Then, she asked with a slight vigilance, "What is the matter?" Zhang Yan walked a few steps to the edge of the cliff. He looked at the rainbow clouds in the western sky and stood there with his sleeves behind his back, saying, "If it's at least a few decades, if it's at most 100 years, the cultivators of the 9 continents will have a battle with the heavenly ghost tribe. Which side will you stand on?" Demonic forefather Go Yu was silent for a while, but she did not answer this question. Instead, she asked, "How is Flaming Mane Ghost Forefather?" Zhang Yan said, "So that heavenly ghost is called Flaming Mane. He has been killed by I." Demonic forefather Go Yu's body trembled. She said, "Ghost Forefather has an indestructible body." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "There will always be a day when heaven and earth will die. This person hasn't even left this world, so how can he be indestructible?" Demonic forefather Go Yu sighed faintly and said, "I didn't make things difficult for your people." Zhang Yan said indifferently, "If not, I wouldn't have come to talk to fellow Taoists today. The sects of the 9 continents will not leave our enemies outside. Fellow Taoist can decide whether to fight or to make peace.